What if Deku got the most broken villain power in anime history as his quirk? Picture this Sosuke Aizen from Bleach. The guy who literally fooled everyone with perfect illusions, manipulated reality itself, and had spiritual pressure so intense it could crush people just by existing. Now imagine that insane power reincarnating into the most heroic kid in MHA. We're talking about complete hypnosis meets I want to save everyone. And let me tell you, watching Deku try to use Aizen's reality-bending abilities while the original villain's memories whisper manipulation tactics in his head. Pure storytelling gold. This is the story of how the Mirror Moon hero proved that even the darkest inheritance can shine with heroic light. Smash that like and subscribe if you're ready for this wild ride. Let's jump in. The morning air bit at Deku's cheeks as he stood before the towering gates of UA High School. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of what he was about to attempt. Around him, other examinees stretched, chatted nervously, or showed off their quirks in small displays of confidence. Deku had none of those luxuries. Just breathe, he muttered to himself, adjusting his yellow backpack for the 100th time. You've studied every hero in existence. You know their fighting patterns, their strategies, their weaknesses. That has to count for something, right? A girl with brown hair floated past him, literally, her fingertips pressed together in concentration. Behind her, a boy with engines for legs revved up with mechanical precision. Even the nervous kids were doing something, sparks from fingertips, small objects floating, minor transformations. Deku clenched his fists, quirkless. The word felt like a lead weight in his chest. Welcome, examinees. Present Mike's voice boomed across the assembly hall, making several students jump. Are you ready to go plus ultra? The response was lukewarm at best. Deku found himself in the middle section, surrounded by teenagers who looked like they could bench press cars or shoot lasers from their eyes. He pulled out his notebook, number 13 in his hero analysis series, and flipped through pages of cramped handwriting and detailed sketches. The practical exam will test your ability to fight villain bots. Present Mike continued, gesturing to a massive screen. You'll have 10 minutes to rack up points by destroying robots. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers are fair game, Deku scribbled notes frantically. 10 minutes, point system, multiple robot types. Oh, and one more thing, Present Mike's grin was visible even from Deku's seat. There's a 0-pointer in each testing ground. It's just an obstacle, no points for taking it down, so don't waste your time. The boy with the engines, Ida, Deku remembered from the brief introductions, raised his hand with military precision. Excuse me, but if this 0-pointer serves no point-scoring purpose, why mention it at all? Such imprecise communication could cause examinees to. It's just there to cause trouble, Present Mike laughed. Think of it as a natural disaster. Deku's pen stopped moving. A natural disaster that gave no points, that seemed inefficient. UA didn't do anything without reason. Battle Center B sprawled before them like a miniature city. Concrete buildings, winding streets, even fake storefronts complete with mannequins in the windows. It would have been impressive if Deku wasn't so terrified. Begin, Present Mike's voice echoed from speakers hidden throughout the urban maze. Chaos erupted immediately. Students scattered in every direction, quirks activating in flashes of light, sound, and energy. A boy with tape dispensing elbows swung between buildings. Someone else left explosion marks on robot hulls as they tore through metal with their bare hands. Deku ran, not strategically, not with purpose, just ran because everyone else was moving and standing still felt like giving up. His sneakers slapped against fake asphalt as he darted between buildings, searching for targets that hadn't already been claimed. Think, he spotted a 1-pointer turning a corner and sprinted after it. No quirk doesn't mean no brain. You've analyzed hundreds of fights. Use that. The robot's design was simple, humanoid basic sensors probably programmed for straightforward attack patterns. Its weak points would be joints, sensors, power coupling an explosion of concrete and metal erupted from the street behind him. Deku spun around and felt his blood freeze. The 0-pointer towered above the buildings, a mechanical giant that made the other robots look like toys. Its red sensors swept the area with methodical precision, and its massive fists had already reduced half a block to rubble. Students scattered like ants, abandoning their point hunting to flee from the monster. Smart. No points meant no reason to engage, but then he heard it. Help, someone help me. A girl with brown hair, the same one who'd been floating earlier, was trapped under a piece of debris, her leg bent at an angle that made Deku's stomach lurch. The 0-pointer's attention fixed on movement, and she was directly in its path. Everyone else was running. The logical thing, the smart thing, was to run too. Deku's feet carried him forward instead. "This is insane," his brain screamed as he sprinted toward the giant robot. "You're quirkless. You can't fight that thing, you'll die." But his legs kept moving, and suddenly he was thinking about All Might, not the symbol of peace from the news, but the man he'd met on the rooftop months ago. The way All Might had looked when he talked about saving people. The way his eyes had lit up when he said heroes didn't think before they acted. The zero-pointer raised its fist, preparing to smash down on the trapped girl. Deku leaped, putting every ounce of strength into a desperate jump that would accomplish nothing except getting him killed alongside. The world exploded into fragments. Not literally, though for a moment, Deku thought he might have finally developed a quirk after all. Instead, his vision shattered like broken glass, each piece reflecting a different angle of the scene before him. In one fragment, he saw himself mid-leap, about to be crushed. In another, the girl screaming. In a third, "Since when were you under the impression that you were looking at reality?" The voice was his own, but not his own. Calm where he was panicked, cold where he was desperate. And with it came a flash of memory that didn't belong to him. A man with brown hair and gentle eyes, standing in a place that looked like ancient Japan, smiling as if he'd just revealed the world's greatest joke. Deku hit concrete that should have been 20 feet below him, rolling to absorb impact in a move he'd never learned. The zero-pointer's fist crashed down on empty space. "What the hell?" The girl's voice was bewildered, but she was standing now, no longer trapped. The debris that had pinned her lay scattered across what looked like a different street entirely. Around them, other students who had been fleeing were now clustered near the building's sides, looking around in confusion. They'd been running toward the robot, but somehow they were all moving away from it. The zero-pointer itself seemed confused, its sensors sweeping for targets that were no longer where they should be. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. The whole street just changed. "Impossible," Ida's voice carried over the bewildered murmurs. "Spatial manipulation quirks require precise calculations and enormous energy expenditure to affect this large an area." Deku stared at his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear anymore. Something else. Something that felt like power, but different from every quirk he'd ever studied. Not flashy, not destructive, subtle. Like the difference between a spotlight and a perfectly placed mirror. The memory fragment came again, stronger this time. The man in the ancient-looking place, his smile widening as reality bent around him like water. "The moment you saw my Zanpakuto, you were already under its spell." "Time's up," Present Mike's voice cut through the confusion, and suddenly everything snapped back to normal. The zero-pointer powered down, students stopped looking around in bewilderment, and the impossible feeling of wrongness that had settled over Battle Center be evaporated like morning mist. Deku collapsed to his knees, a migraine splitting his skull in half. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and concern. Recovery Girl's healing had fixed the worst of his headache, but Deku still felt like his brain was wrapped in cotton. "Exhaustion quirk manifestation," she'd muttered while working. "Happens more often than you'd think. Bodies sometimes need extreme stress to unlock their potential." Quirk manifestation. The words felt surreal. All his life he'd been quirkless. The doctors had been certain, extra toe joint, no quirk factor detected, case closed. And yet, young Midoriya, Deku looked up to find All Might filling the doorway, somehow managing to look both imposing and concerned in his civilian form. The hero's sunken eyes studied him with an intensity that made Deku squirm. "All Might, I mean sir, peace, my boy." All Might's smile was gentler than his public persona usually allowed. "I wanted to check on you after your impressive display in Battle Center B. I don't know what happened," Deku said quickly. "I mean, I jumped at that robot, which was stupid, and then everything got weird, and suddenly everyone was somewhere else, and breathe." All Might pulled up a chair, his movements careful and deliberate. "Tell me about the weird part." Deku hesitated. How could he explain seeing reality break apart like glass? How could he describe hearing his own voice say things he'd never thought, with confidence he'd never possessed? It was like, he struggled for words. Like I was seeing through someone else's eyes, someone who knew things I don't know, who understood how to make people see things differently. All Might's expression grew more serious. "And this someone, did they have a name?" Another memory fragment hit without warning. A nameplate on a desk, elegant calligraphy that read 5th Division Captain. Below it, in smaller text, "Sasuke Aizen." I think so. "But that's impossible, right? I mean, I'm me, I've always been me." All Might was quiet for a long moment, his gaunt features thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Deku sit up straighter. "Young Midoriya, there are many things about quirks that we still don't understand. Sometimes, abilities manifest in ways that challenge our preconceptions about what's possible." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intent. What matters is not where power comes from, but how we choose to use it. From what I observed today, you used yours to save others. That tells me more about your character than any quirk registry ever could. But what if, Deku swallowed hard. What if this power comes from somewhere bad? What if the person I was remembering was evil? All Might's smile returned, warmer this time. Then you have the opportunity to prove that past doesn't determine future. That the content of one's character matters more than the circumstances of one's birth or rebirth, as the case may be. The hero stood, adjusting his tie with practiced efficiency. I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of each other, young Midoriya. UA has ways of attracting those with interesting stories. He paused at the doorway, looking back with an expression Deku couldn't quite read. Oh, and congratulations on your acceptance. Your entrance exam performance was most illuminating. 3 days later, the official letter arrived. Deku's hands shook as he opened the envelope, his mother hovering nearby with barely contained anxiety. Inside was the standard acceptance packet, but paperclipped to the front was a handwritten note on UA letterhead. Young Midoriya, your practical exam scores were among the most unusual we've recorded. 0 villain points, but 43 rescue points, the highest in your testing group. More intriguingly, multiple witnesses reported spatial anomalies during your confrontation with the 0-pointer. We would like to schedule a private meeting to discuss your quirk registration and potential specialized training protocols. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. Your future awaits. Principal Nezu P.S. Please bring any materials related to your recent memory experiences. Understanding the full scope of your abilities will be crucial for everyone's safety. Deku read the note 3 times before it sank in. They knew. Somehow, UA knew that something unprecedented had happened in Battle Center B, and they wanted to help him figure out what. For the first time since the exam, Deku allowed himself to smile. Whatever was happening to him, quirk manifestation, inherited memories, or something else entirely, he wouldn't have to face it alone. Outside his window, clouds drifted across the sky like fragments of a broken mirror, each piece reflecting a different possibility for the future. In the depths of his mind, a calm voice that wasn't quite his own whispered, "How interesting. It seems this world will be far more entertaining than I expected." But for now, Deku pushed that voice aside and focused on the acceptance letter in his hands. Whatever came next, he would face it as a hero, even if he wasn't entirely sure who he was anymore. The UA uniform felt wrong on Deku's shoulders as he walked through the massive gates for his first official day. Everything about this felt surreal, from the acceptance letter still folded in his pocket to the way other students glanced at him with curiosity rather than dismissal. I have a quirk, he reminded himself for the 100th time since the exam. I actually have a quirk, but what kind of quirk made people see things that weren't there? What kind of power came with memories that belonged to someone else entirely? Deku. He turned to find Ida striding toward him with mechanical precision, hand chopping through the air in greeting. It is wonderful to see a fellow examinee who demonstrated such remarkable heroic spirit. Oh, thanks, Deku managed, still not used to being acknowledged by his peers. I'm just glad everyone made it out okay. Indeed, though I must admit I am curious about your quirk. Ida's engines gave a small rev of excitement. Spatial manipulation on that scale is quite rare. What do you call it? Deku's mouth went dry. He'd been dreading this question all week. Well, it's not exactly spatial manipulation. It's more like making people see things differently. I haven't really named it yet. Fascinating, a perception-based ability with large area effects. Most intriguing. Before Deku could explain that he had no idea how any of it worked, a familiar explosive voice cut through the morning air. Oi Deku! Bakugo stormed across the courtyard, his usual scowl somehow more intense than usual. Other students scattered out of his path like he was a natural disaster. Ka-chan. You made it into UA too. Deku's automatic smile faltered when he saw the look in his childhood friend's eyes. That's great, I knew you would, your quirk is so… cut the crap. Bakugo grabbed Deku by the collar, yanking him close enough that Deku could see the red flecks in his angry eyes. I don't know what the hell you did during that exam, but I know it wasn't some hidden quirk bullshit. I don't know what you mean. The hell you don't. Sparks popped between Bakugo's fingers. You've been quirkless your whole damn life and suddenly you're pulling spatial tricks. That's not how quirks work and we both know it. Ida stepped forward, hand chopping diplomatically. Perhaps we should discuss this inside. Class begins soon and this doesn't concern you, engine legs. Bakugo's glare could have melted steel. Me and Deku need to have a conversation about problem children. all three boys froze. A man in a sleeping bag had somehow appeared behind them, his tired eyes surveying the scene with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario too many times. "You're blocking the entrance," the man continued, voice flat with exhaustion. "Move!" Bakugo released Deku's collar with obvious reluctance. "This isn't over, Deku." As they filed into the building, Deku caught a glimpse of the man's face and felt his blood turn to ice. Those weren't just tired eyes, they were the eyes of someone who could erase quirks with a look. Eraserhead, Deku realized with growing dread, he's going to be our teacher. Class 1A buzzed with nervous energy as students filed into their seats. Deku found himself between a girl with earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes and a boy whose tail suggested some kind of animal quirk. Everyone seemed to be sizing each other up, probably wondering who their real competition would be. "If you're here to make friends," Eraserhead said from the front of the class, having somehow shed his sleeping bag, "you can pack up your stuff now." The cheerful atmosphere died instantly. "Welcome to UA's hero course. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher." He held up what looked like a standard PE uniform. "Right now, we're going to conduct a quirk assessment test." A collective intake of breath swept the room. "But what about orientation?" The girl with the brown hair, Uraraka, Deku remembered, raised her hand tentatively. "And the ceremony? If you really want to make the big leagues, you can't waste time on pointless ceremonies." Aizawa's smile was anything but reassuring. "Here at UA, we're not tethered to traditions. That means I get to run my class however I see fit." His gaze swept across the room, lingering on each student before moving on. When those dark eyes fixed on Deku, he felt like a bug under a microscope. "You've been taking standardized tests most of your lives," Aizawa continued, "but you've never gotten to use your quirks in physical exams before. The country's still trying to pretend we're all created equal by not letting those with the most power excel. It's not rational. One day, the Ministry of Education will learn." He pulled up a tablet, scrolling through what looked like test scores. "Bakugo, you managed the most villain points in the practical exam. What was your farthest distance throw in junior high?" 67 meters, Bakugo answered immediately, pride clear in his voice. "Right. Try doing it with your quirk." Aizawa tossed him a softball, and Bakugo's grin turned predatory. He wound up like a professional pitcher, and at the moment of release, channeled an explosion through his palm that sent the ball screaming into the distance like a rocket. "Die," he shouted after it, because of course he did. The tablet beeped, 705.2 meters. Excited murmurs rippled through the class. "You'll be performing 8 physical tests to gauge your potential," Aizawa announced. "Whoever comes in last place will be judged hopeless and will be expelled." The murmurs died. "Like I said, I get to decide how this class runs. Understand, if that's a problem, you can head home right now." Deku's hands started shaking. He'd barely figured out that he had a quirk, let alone how to control it. How was he supposed to compete with people who'd been training their abilities for years? "Oh, and one more thing," Aizawa added, almost as an afterthought. "Use whatever you've got. I don't care if it's flashy or subtle, traditional or unusual." His eyes found Deku again. "I want to see what you're really capable of." The 50-meter dash came first. Deku watched as Ida's engines carried him across the finish line in 3.04 seconds, while Tsuyu's powerful legs managed 5.58. When his turn came, he ran as fast as his quirkless body could manage, 7.02 seconds. Pathetic compared to his classmates, but at least it was honest. Side steps, grip strength, standing long jump test after test where Deku scored average at best. He could feel Aizawa watching him with growing interest, which only made him more nervous. Then came the softball throw. "Midoriya," Aizawa called, "you're up." Deku stepped into the circle, acutely aware of every eye on him. The softball felt impossibly heavy in his hand. Just throw it normally, he told himself. Don't try to use the quirk. You don't know how it works yet. He wound up, channeled every ounce of strength he possessed, and hurled the ball as hard as he could. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and landed with a soft thud maybe 60 meters away. 67.8 meters, Aizawa announced. Snickers echoed from some of his classmates. Bakugo's expression was particularly smug. "Interesting," Aizawa murmured, making another note on his tablet. Again, Deku blinked. "You heard me, use your quirk this time." "My quirk." Deku took another softball, trying to remember what had happened during the entrance exam. The shattered vision, the feeling of seeing through someone else's eyes, the calm voice that wasn't his own. Reality is what I choose it to be. The memory fragment hit him like a physical blow. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. a place that looked like feudal Japan, standing before a group of men in formal robes. His own voice, but not his own, speaking with absolute authority. "Gentlemen of Central 46, I believe there has been a misunderstanding." Deku gasped and nearly dropped the softball. For just a moment, the testing ground had looked different. The targets hadn't been where they should be, the distance markers were wrong, and everyone was looking in the wrong direction. But it was just for a moment. He threw the ball again, and it landed in almost exactly the same spot. 67.9 meters, Aizawa said flatly, more snickers. Bakugo looked like he was about to explode with vindicated fury. Aizawa's expression was unreadable. One more time. "And Midoriya, yes, sir, don't hold back." The third softball felt different in Deku's hands. Heavier somehow, but also more significant, like it was the key to understanding something important. He closed his eyes and tried to remember the feeling from the entrance exam. Not the panic or the desperation, but the moment when everything had made sense. When he'd known exactly what to do. The moment you saw my Zanpakuto, you were already under its spell. This time, Deku didn't fight the memory. He let it wash over him, feeling that strange calm settle into his bones. When he opened his eyes, the world looked slightly different. Not dramatically, just shifted, like looking at a familiar room through a prism. He threw the ball. To most of the class, it looked like a normal throw. Maybe a little better than his previous attempts, but nothing spectacular. The ball arced through the air and came down about 70 meters away, but Aizawa's tablet read something very different. 46.3 meters, he announced, his voice carefully neutral. The class erupted in confused murmurs. "Wait, that doesn't make sense," Uraraka protested. "It went way farther than that, did it?" Aizawa's tired eyes swept over the class. "Are you sure about what you saw?" Deku felt the migraine starting behind his eyes, but he also felt something else. A creeping realization that made his stomach drop. He hadn't thrown the ball farther. He'd made everyone think he'd thrown it farther, while the actual ball had landed much closer. The distance measurement was accurate. He'd somehow created an illusion that fooled an entire class of hero students. And worst of all, it had felt natural, like something he'd done 1,000 times before. The remaining tests blurred together in a haze of average scores and growing dread. Deku's quirk, whatever it was, didn't seem to help with grip strength or endurance running. If anything, trying to use it made everything harder. By the time they gathered for final results, his head was pounding and his vision kept fragmenting at the edges. "All right, time to give you your results," Aizawa announced, pulling up a holographic display. "I was lying, by the way. No one's going home. That was just a rational deception to make sure you gave your all." The relief in the air was palpable. Deku's name appeared near the bottom of the rankings, just as he'd expected, but that wasn't what worried him. What worried him was the way Aizawa kept looking at him with those dark, evaluating eyes. As the class began to disperse, chattering excitedly about their first day, Aizawa's voice cut through the noise. "Midoriya. Stay behind." The others filed out, though Deku noticed Bakugo's suspicious glare as he left. Soon it was just him and Aizawa in the empty testing ground. "Interesting quirk," Aizawa said without preamble. I'm still figuring it out, sir. Perception manipulation with large area effects, subtle enough that most people don't realize they're being affected until it's pointed out to them." Aizawa's eyes began to glow red. "Let's see how it works when I'm watching." Deku felt something inside him shut off like a switch being flipped. The constant low-level awareness he hadn't even realized he possessed gone. The world suddenly felt flatter, more normal. "Erasure," Aizawa explained, his hair floating as if underwater. "I can nullify quirks by looking at the person using them. Very handy for keeping problem children in line." He blinked and the effect stopped. Immediately, Deku felt that strange awareness return. "Your quirk is still active," Aizawa noted, "even when you're not consciously using it. That's unusual." "Is that bad?" "Depends on what you plan to do with it." Aizawa's expression was serious. "Perception-based quirks are some of the most heavily regulated in Japan, for obvious reasons." Deku's throat went dry. "Regulated how?" "Licensing requirements, mandatory oversight, psychological evaluations every 6 months." Aizawa listed them off like he was reading from a manual. "The public doesn't like the idea of heroes who can mess with their heads, even for good reasons. But I would never, I know." Aizawa's voice softened slightly. "I've seen the entrance exam footage. You used your ability to save people, not hurt them. That counts for something." He pulled out a tablet and made a few notes. "We'll need to schedule some specialized training sessions. Figure out your limits, work on control, establish some safety protocols. and you'll need to register your quirk officially. What should I call it? Aizawa was quiet for a moment, studying him with those tired eyes. What does it feel like when you use it? Deku thought about the fragmented vision, the sense of reality bending like light through water. Like looking at the world through a broken mirror. Everything's the same, but reflected differently. Mirror-based illusions, Aizawa mused. How about mirror moon? Kyoka Suigetsu in Japanese, it's an old saying about things that are beautiful but unattainable. Seems appropriate for a quirk that shows people things that aren't really there. Mirror moon, Kyoka Suigetsu. The name sent an electric shock through Deku's system. He knew that phrase, knew it from memories that weren't his own. A sword with a beautiful hilt, capable of complete hypnosis. A weapon wielded by someone who, all according to plan. The memory fragment was so vivid it knocked him to his knees. A man with gentle brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses standing over the defeated forms of his former colleagues. The same calm smile, the same quiet confidence, the same voice that whispered in the back of Deku's mind during quiet moments. Midoriya, Aizawa was beside him instantly, one hand on his shoulder. What happened? Deku struggled to form words around the pounding in his skull. I remembered something, someone, he had the same ability. Kyoka Suigetsu, Aizawa's grip tightened. What did you remember? He used it to betray people who trusted him, to manipulate everyone around him for his own goals. Deku looked up at his teacher with wide, terrified eyes. What if that's what I'm meant to become? What if having this power makes me like him? For a long moment, Aizawa was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Deku pay attention. Powers don't make people evil, kid. Choices do. He stood, offering Deku a hand up. The fact that you're worried about it tells me everything I need to know about what kind of hero you'll be. But as they walked back toward the school building, Deku couldn't shake the memory of that gentle smile and the absolute certainty in that other voice. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, he could still hear it whispering, "How fascinating. It seems I have been given a second chance to achieve perfection." And the worst part was, a small part of him was listening. The meeting room in the faculty building felt too formal for what was supposed to be a casual conversation. Deku sat across from All Might, whose civilian form somehow made the discussion feel more serious rather than less. Between them lay a stack of papers, quirk registration forms, psychological evaluation requests, and what looked like legal documents. I've been thinking about our conversation in the medical bay, All Might said, his sunken eyes studying Deku carefully. About power that comes from questionable sources. I keep remembering more things. Deku's voice was barely above a whisper. Not just abilities, memories, like I lived a whole different life as someone else. And this someone else, what kind of person were they? Deku hesitated. How could he explain the fragments that came to him in quiet moments? The sense of cold calculation, the way problems became puzzles to be solved through manipulation rather than direct action. Brilliant, he finally said. But wrong. He thought he was better than everyone else, that other people were just pieces to move around on a board. All Might nodded slowly. And how does that make you feel? Terrified. The admission came out in a rush. What if I start thinking like that? What if having these memories changes who I am? Then we make sure it doesn't happen. All Might's voice carried absolute conviction. Power without moral framework is dangerous, but power with the right principles can change the world. He pulled out a notebook, not one of Deku's hero analysis books, but something simpler. A composition notebook with ethics written on the cover in All Might's careful handwriting. I've been researching perception-based quirks, All Might explained. The regulation, the training protocols, the incidents that led to current oversight requirements. Want to know what the biggest problem is? Deku nodded. Consent. All Might flipped open the notebook, revealing pages of notes and diagrams. Most perception quirks work without the target's knowledge or permission. The person being affected has no say in what happens to them. But that's how mine works too, Deku protested. I can't exactly ask people for permission in the middle of a fight. Can't you? All Might's smile was gentle but challenging. What if we developed protocols, rules that you follow every time you use your ability? He pulled out a pen and slid the notebook across the table. Let's start with the basics. What do you never want to do with your quirk? Deku stared at the blank page for a moment, then began writing. Never make someone hurt themselves or others. Never change someone's memories permanently. Never use it for personal gain. Never make someone do something they'd normally refuse to do. Good start, All Might said, reading over the list. What else? Always use it to protect people, not control them. Stop immediately if someone asks me to. Never use it on friends without telling them first. The list grew longer as they worked together, covering scenarios Deku had never even considered. By the time they were finished, the consent doctrine filled 3 pages with specific rules and exceptions. "This is your moral framework," All Might said, tapping the notebook. "Your reminder that having power doesn't mean you get to decide everything for everyone else." Deku read through the rules again. They felt right, like armor against the whispered suggestions that sometimes echoed in the back of his mind. "Will this really work? Only if you want it to." All Might's expression grew serious. "These rules are only as strong as your commitment to following them, especially when it would be easier not to." The specialized training room looked like a cross between a gym and a psychology lab. Cameras mounted in every corner, sensors embedded in the walls, and equipment Deku didn't recognize scattered across tables. "Welcome to your new second home," Aizawa said dryly, gesturing around the space. "Quirk analysis and control training for students with unique requirements." "Is all this really necessary?" Deku asked, eyeing a particularly intimidating machine covered in blinking lights. "Perception quirks have a 23% higher incident rate than combat-based abilities," Aizawa replied, pulling up data on a tablet. "Mind control, false memory implantation, mass hysteria events. The public has good reason to be nervous." He activated one of the machines, and suddenly the room filled with holographic civilians going about their daily business. Training Scenario 1, Evacuation Assistance. Use your quirk to guide these people to the exits without causing panic. Deku studied the scene. The holograms looked incredibly realistic, complete with individual personalities and movement patterns. One was reading a newspaper, another was talking on a phone, a small group was having an animated conversation near the far wall. How tediously simple. The voice in his head was dismissive, already calculating the most efficient way to manipulate the entire group simultaneously. Deku pushed it aside and focused on the rules he'd written with All Might. Always use it to protect people, not control them. Instead of creating a mass illusion, Deku approached the problem differently. He made the exit signs appear brighter to one person, caused another to notice a wet floor sign that would naturally redirect their path, convinced a third that they'd heard an announcement about a special event happening outside. Small nudges, not commands, suggestions rather than demands. It took longer than mass manipulation would have, but eventually all the holograms made their way to the exits without panic or confusion. "Interesting approach," Aizawa noted, making marks on his tablet. "Longer execution time, but much lower psychological impact on the targets." Again, they ran the scenario 12 more times, each iteration adding complications. Injured civilians, blocked exits, hostile individuals who resisted suggestion. Each time, Deku stuck to his principles even when the whispered voice offered faster, more efficient solutions. By the end of the session, his head was pounding and his clothes were soaked with sweat. "Not bad for a first attempt," Aizawa said. "Your control is better than I expected, and your approach is refreshingly ethical." "It feels wrong," Deku admitted, "like I'm fighting against my own instincts." "Good." Aizawa's smile was sharp. "The moment it feels natural to mess with people's heads is the moment you stop being a hero and start being a villain." He powered down the training equipment and made final notes on his tablet. "We'll do this 3 times a week until I'm satisfied you won't accidentally hypnotize half of Tokyo. Speaking of which," Aizawa pulled out an official-looking form covered in government seals. "Quirk registration. You'll need specialized licensing, mandatory check-ins with a department psychologist, and at least 2 character references from licensed heroes." Deku's heart sank. "How long does that usually take for normal quirks?" "A few weeks for perception-based abilities," Aizawa shrugged. "Could be months, maybe longer if they decide you need extended evaluation. But I'll still be able to train at UA, right? As long as you follow the protocols we establish. No unsupervised quirk use, regular psychological evaluations, and complete transparency with faculty about any unusual experiences." Deku thought about the memory fragments, the voice that offered tactical advice he'd never learned. "What if the experiences get worse? Then we deal with it." Aizawa's voice was matter-of-fact. "You're not the first student with a complicated quirk history, probably won't be the last." Class 1A's homeroom buzzed with nervous energy as students filed in for their second day. Word had already spread about Deku's quirk assessment performance, specifically the part where he'd somehow made a softball appear to travel farther than it actually had. "Settle down," Aizawa said from behind his desk, looking even more tired than usual. "Today we're doing quirk demonstrations. Each of you will show the class your ability and explain how it works." Groans echoed around the room. "This isn't for my entertainment," Aizawa continued. Understanding your classmates' abilities is crucial for team exercises and rescue operations. Midoriya, you're up first. Deku's stomach dropped. He'd been hoping to avoid this for as long as possible. He walked to the front of the classroom, acutely aware of every eye following him, especially Bakugo's suspicious glare. Hi everyone, his voice cracked slightly. My quirk is called Mirror Moon. It's kind of hard to explain. Just show us, Kirishima called out encouragingly. Deku took a deep breath and activated his ability. Carefully, following the protocols he'd practiced with Aizawa, he created a simple illusion. To most of the class, it looked like he'd moved 3 feet to the left while remaining perfectly still. Whoa, Kaminari blinked rapidly. That's trippy, man. It's a perception-based quirk, Deku explained, the illusion already fading. I can make people see things a little differently than they actually are. But he added quickly, I only use it for rescue operations, to help guide people to safety or hide them from danger. That's so cool, Uraraka raised her hand. Can you make yourself invisible? Not exactly invisible, more like, I can make people not notice me, or think I'm somewhere else. Deku demonstrated by seeming to fade into the background while actually remaining in plain sight. Fascinating, Ida noted, engines revving with excitement. A misdirection-based ability with rescue applications, most ingenious, but not everyone looked impressed. Mineta was frowning and Bakugo looked like he was about to explode. What are the limitations? Aizawa asked from his desk. I can only affect a few people at once and it only works if I can see them, Deku replied. Strong emotions or pain can break the illusion, and if someone knows what to look for, they can resist it. And the ethical constraints, Deku straightened up, this was important. I never use it to control people or make them do things they don't want to do, just gentle suggestions, like making an exit seem more appealing or helping them notice a safe path. Demonstrate. Aizawa's red eyes began to glow, and Deku felt his quirk shut off completely. Then the glow faded and his abilities returned. I can nullify his quirk instantly if necessary, Aizawa explained to the class, and he's agreed to several oversight protocols to ensure safe usage. Wait, Mineta interjected. What's to stop him from using his quirk on us right now? How do we know when we're being messed with? The question Deku had been dreading. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's actually a really good point, Jiro said, her earphone jacks twitching with nervousness. Deku looked around the room at his classmates' suddenly wary faces. I promise I won't use it on any of you without permission, and if I ever do need to for training or emergencies, I'll tell you about it afterward. Promises are just words, Bakugo growled. How do we know you're not lying right now? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Deku could feel the fragile trust he'd been building start to crumble. Then Tsuyu raised her hand. What if someone could turn off his quirk when we needed them to? All eyes turned to Aizawa, but he shook his head. I can't be with you 24/7. Then what about an emergency word? Yaoyorozu suggested. Something that would signal him to stop using his abilities immediately, Deku nodded eagerly. Yes, that's perfect. Someone could be my failsafe. I'll do it. Everyone turned to stare at Bakugo in shock. What? He scowled. If Deku's going to be messing with reality, I want to be able to shut him down. Kachan, are you sure? It's a big responsibility. Shut up, Deku, just. What's the word? Deku thought for a moment, remembering the memories that weren't his own. A phrase that would break any illusion, no matter how perfect. King's Gambit, he said quietly. King's Gambit, Bakugo repeated. If I say that, you drop everything immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Agreed. The tension in the room eased slightly. It wasn't perfect trust, but it was a start. Well then, Aizawa said, making notes on his tablet, I think we have our protocols established. Next demonstration. As the focus shifted to the next student, Deku caught Bakugo's eye. His childhood friend was still scowling, but there was something else there too, something that might have been understanding. Later after class, Bakugo cornered him in the hallway. I don't know what's really going on with you, Bakugo said quietly, but I know you're not telling the whole truth. Kachan, I don't care. Bakugo's voice was uncharacteristically serious. Whatever's happening, whatever these memories are, just don't lose yourself, okay? You're annoying as hell, but you're still Deku. Before Deku could respond, Bakugo stalked off down the hallway, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the whispered voice that seemed amused by the entire exchange. How interesting, it seems you've acquired yourself a guardian. How unexpectedly touching. But for once, Deku didn't find the voice as unsettling as usual, having Bakugo as his failsafe felt right. Like having a piece of his old life anchoring him to who he really was, even if he was becoming less sure of that every day. The UA library was nearly empty at this hour, which was exactly how Deku preferred it. Spread across his table were psychology textbooks, research papers on perception quirks, and his ever-present hero analysis notebook. Illusion-based quirks, theoretical frameworks, and practical applications, he read from one of the papers. Studies have shown that prolonged use of perception manipulation abilities can lead to dissociation between the user's sense of reality and objective truth. That didn't sound good. He flipped to another article. Case study. Hero designation Mystique retired after developing inability to distinguish between self-created illusions and reality. Definitely not good. Perhaps you should focus on more practical applications, the voice in his head suggested. These academic papers hardly scratch the surface of what your abilities could achieve. Deku ignored the voice and kept reading. The more he learned about perception quirks, the more he understood why they were so heavily regulated. The potential for abuse was enormous, and the psychological toll on users was significant. But there was also hope. Several papers described successful therapeutic applications, helping trauma victims process difficult memories, allowing people to overcome phobias by gradually adjusting their perceptions. When used ethically and carefully, perception quirks could heal rather than harm. Such limited thinking, the voice commented. These researchers fail to grasp the true potential. Reality is merely a consensus after all. Change the consensus and you change reality itself. That's not what I want to do, Deku whispered to himself. Isn't it? When you guided those people to safety during the entrance exam, weren't you changing their reality? Making them see a world where escape was possible instead of hopeless. Deku paused in his reading. The voice had a point, but not in the way it intended. His quirk could help people see possibilities they might miss, hope where they saw only despair. That was different from manipulation, wasn't it? He pulled out his phone and started making notes in a new file labeled Quirk Ethics Personal Guidelines. Use abilities to expand options, not limit them. Help people make better informed choices, don't make choices for them. Always respect free will and personal autonomy. Remember that perception isn't reality, don't lose track of what's actually true. Such noble intentions, the voice mused. I wonder how long they'll last when you're faced with impossible choices. Deku closed his notebook with more force than necessary. Whatever his past life had been, whatever those memories represented, he was choosing to be different. He was choosing to be a hero. But as he packed up his research materials, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Not by security cameras or library staff, by something else. Something that understood the true nature of his abilities and was waiting to see what he would become. In the shadows between the bookshelves, a figure with sophisticated recording equipment made careful notes about the young hero in training who possessed one of the most dangerous quirks anyone had ever seen. And somewhere in a government office, an analyst studied footage of the UA entrance exam and smiled coldly. Subject 0 confirmed, he murmured into his secure phone. Pattern recognition suggests Class S tactical adaptation with integrated memory overlay. Recommend immediate escalation to Protocol 7. The hunt for the reincarnated tactician had begun. The weekend shopping district buzzed with the kind of lazy afternoon energy that made everything feel safe and normal. Families wandered between stores, couples shared crepes from sidewalk vendors, and somewhere a street musician played guitar badly enough to be charming rather than annoying. Deku walked alongside Ida and Todoroki, still getting used to the idea that he had friends who actually wanted to spend time with him outside of class. They'd grabbed lunch at a small restaurant Ida had enthusiastically recommended, and were now meandering through the crowds with no particular destination in mind. I must say, Midoriya, Ida was saying, his hand chopping through the air with characteristic precision, your approach to quirk ethics is most admirable. The consent doctrine you described shows remarkable moral sophistication for someone our age. It's not that sophisticated, Deku replied, adjusting his backpack nervously. I don't want to become the kind of person who thinks they know what's best for everyone else. Todoroki, who had been quiet for most of the afternoon, glanced at him with those mismatched eyes. That suggests you've seen what happens when people with power make that mistake. More than seen, Deku thought, remembering fragments of memories that weren't his own, lived it. Something like that, he said instead. A sound like thunder rolled across the shopping district. All three boys froze, training kicking in automatically. That wasn't thunder, it was the sound of concrete cracking under enormous pressure. There, Todoroki pointed toward the central plaza, where a massive crater had appeared in the ground. Steam rose from the broken pavement and people were screaming. They ran. The scene that greeted them was chaos incarnate. A villain roughly the size of a small building stood in the center of the plaza, his body composed of what looked like liquid concrete that shifted and flowed with each movement. Every step he took created more craters, and every gesture sent chunks of debris flying in random directions. But the real problem wasn't the villain himself, it was his quirk's secondary effect. "The ground," Ida shouted over the noise. "It's becoming unstable." The concrete throughout the plaza was softening, turning into a thick, gray quicksand that trapped anyone who couldn't get to higher ground fast enough. Already, dozens of civilians were stuck waist-deep or worse, and the affected area was expanding outward like a slow-motion explosion. "Emergency services are at least 10 minutes out," Todoroki said, ice already forming around his right hand. "We need to get those people out now." "But we're just students," Deku protested, even as his mind began automatically cataloging escape routes and civilian positions. "We're not supposed to engage without supervision." "Tell that to them," Ida replied grimly, gesturing toward a family with 2 small children who were sinking deeper by the second. The villain, who seemed more focused on causing destruction than targeting specific people, raised both arms above his head. The concrete beneath at least 30 civilians began to bubble and shift. Deku closed his eyes and felt for that strange awareness that had become part of his daily existence since the entrance exam. The ability to sense spatial relationships, to understand how people moved and where they looked. "This is child's play," the voice in his head commented with something that might have been amusement. "A simple tactical problem with an elegant solution." For once, Deku didn't push the voice away. He needed that cold, analytical perspective if he was going to save everyone. "I have an idea," he said, opening his eyes, "but I need you two to trust me completely." Ida and Todoroki exchanged glances. "What do you need us to do?" Todoroki asked. The plan was insane and relied entirely on Deku's ability to coordinate 3 different rescue operations simultaneously without anyone realizing what was happening. Phase 1: create the lanes. Deku activated his quirk more fully than he ever had before, feeling that familiar sensation of reality becoming malleable around him. To the trapped civilians, the concrete plaza began to look different. Not dramatically, just enough to notice pathways they hadn't seen before. To the family with the young children, a raised walkway appeared to lead directly toward the shopping center entrance. It looked perfectly solid, clearly marked with safety railings, obviously the smart choice for evacuation. To a group of teenagers trapped near the fountain, emergency stairs materialized leading up to what appeared to be a temporary evacuation platform. To the elderly couple struggling near the villain's left flank, a gentle ramp became visible, leading to what looked like a medical station staffed with professional heroes. None of these things actually existed. But they didn't need to, because Ida and Todoroki were creating the real paths. Phase 2: build the reality. Ida's engines roared to life as he began constructing actual walkways using debris from the villain's attacks. His speed made it possible to build and reinforce paths faster than the civilians could traverse them, always staying one step ahead of where Deku's illusions were guiding people. Meanwhile, Todoroki used his ice to create genuine stairs and platforms that materialized just as civilians reached for them. His timing had to be perfect, too early and people would notice the illusion, too late and they'd fall. The coordination required was staggering. Deku had to track 30+ civilians, maintain multiple complex illusions, and provide real-time guidance to his teammates through subtle hand signals and spatial cues. "Magnificent," the voice in his head purred. "This is true tactical coordination. This is what power should look like." But even as the rescues progressed, Deku could feel the strain building behind his eyes. Maintaining this many illusions simultaneously was like trying to conduct an orchestra while juggling flaming batons. Phase 3: deal with the source. The concrete villain had finally noticed that his victims were escaping, and his attention was beginning to focus on the 3 students who were somehow undoing all his work. "Annoying kids," he roared, raising one massive fist. "Stay put so I can squash you." The punch came down like a meteor. This time, the memory fragment hit Deku with perfect clarity. Not just images, but understanding, a complete tactical analysis of the opponent's fighting patterns, strengths, and weaknesses. The villain's concrete form was impressive but slow, his attacks telegraphed seconds in advance, and his rage made him predictable. "He overextends on every strike," the voice noted clinically. pattern suggests compensating for lack of precision with overwhelming force. Textbook amateur mistake. Move left, Deku shouted to his teammates, already seeing where the next attack would land. Todoroki's ice wall materialized precisely where the villain's follow-up strike would hit, redirecting the blow harmlessly into empty space. Ida circled around to the villain's blind spot, using his speed to confuse and disorient. And throughout it all, Deku maintained the evacuation illusions, even as blood began to trickle from his nose from the sheer mental effort. The last civilian cleared the danger zone just as professional heroes finally arrived on scene. Endeavor's flames made short work of the concrete villain once he wasn't worried about collateral damage to trapped civilians. The arrest was efficient and brutal, exactly what Deku expected from the number 2 hero. But as the dust settled and emergency crews began assessing the damage, Deku found himself swaying on his feet. The migraine was so intense that the world kept fragmenting at the edges of his vision, like looking through a kaleidoscope of broken glass. Midoriya, Ida caught him as his knees gave out. "Are you all right?" "Just Quirk exhaustion," Deku managed through gritted teeth. "Used it too much at once." "That was incredible coordination," Todoroki said, though his voice carried a note of concern. "I've never seen tactical awareness like that from someone our age." Because it's not from someone our age, Deku thought miserably. It's from someone who spent decades perfecting the art of manipulation. "You three," they turned to find Endeavor striding toward them, his flames dimmed but still intimidating. Behind him walked several other heroes, including one Deku didn't recognize, a woman with recording equipment who looked more like a journalist than a rescuer. "Unauthorized quirk usage," Endeavor stated flatly. "You're lucky no one was injured by your reckless." "Actually," the woman interrupted, stepping forward with a small smile, "I think they saved lives. I'm Hana Sato from Hero Public Safety Commission. We've been monitoring this incident." She pulled out a tablet and showed them footage from multiple angles. The evacuation had been even more coordinated than Deku realized, like watching a perfectly choreographed dance where every movement served multiple purposes. 37 civilians evacuated without a single injury, Sato continued. Emergency response time reduced by an estimated 6 minutes, and all accomplished through teamwork and strategic thinking rather than brute force. Endeavor's scowl deepened. "They're still unlicensed students, which is why this is so impressive." Sato's attention focused on Deku with laser intensity. "Tell me, young man, what's your quirk classification?" Perception-based." "Mirror Moon?" Something shifted in Sato's expression. "And you've registered this ability officially?" "Still in process," Deku replied, suddenly feeling like he was being evaluated rather than praised. "I see." She made several notes on her tablet. "We'll be in touch with UA about your training protocols. This kind of tactical coordination suggests significant potential for specialized rescue operations." As the heroes dispersed and the scene returned to normal, Deku couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just passed some kind of test he didn't know he was taking. "Come on," Ida said, still supporting Deku's weight. "Let's get you to recovery, girl. That migraine looks severe." But as they walked away from the plaza, Deku noticed the news crews that had arrived during the cleanup. Cameras and reporters, all asking questions about the mysterious rescue coordination and the student heroes who saved dozens of lives. And in the crowd of onlookers, partially hidden behind a pillar, a man in a dark suit was filming everything with professional equipment. When Deku tried to get a better look at him, the man was gone. The evening news played on the common room TV as Class 1A gathered for dinner. Deku tried to ignore it, but his classmates were too excited about seeing their school on television. "And in other news," the anchor was saying, "dramatic rescue footage from today's villain attack in the shopping district shows what appears to be coordinated tactical response from several UA students." The footage was remarkably clear. Multiple camera angles showing the evacuation, the teamwork, and the precise timing that had made everything possible. But what caught Deku's attention was how the cameras had somehow captured angles that shouldn't have been possible, like they'd known exactly where to film from. "You're famous, Deku," Uraraka bounced excitedly on the couch. "That was amazing coordination. It wasn't just me," Deku protested. "Ida and Todoroki did all the real work." "Don't be modest," Kaminari added. "The way you guided everyone out looked like something a professional rescue hero would do." "Yeah," Minato chimed in, though his tone was less enthusiastic, "almost like you knew exactly what everyone was thinking." The room went quiet for a moment. Several classmates glanced at each other meaningfully. "I was just paying attention to body language and movement patterns," Deku said quickly. "Basic situational awareness." "Right," Bakugo muttered from across the room. Basic, the news report continued, including interviews with several of the rescued civilians. Their accounts were remarkably consistent. They'd all seen clear escape routes, well-marked and obviously safe. None of them mentioned feeling confused or manipulated. Perfect execution, the voice in Deku's head commented approvingly. They experienced exactly what you wanted them to experience, with no awareness of the deception involved. Truly masterful work. Deku's stomach twisted. Had he manipulated those people, or had he simply helped them see opportunities that were already there? The distinction felt important, but he wasn't sure he understood the difference anymore. Hey Midoriya, Jiro caught his attention from across the room. That thing you did today, the coordination, that's part of your quirk, right? All eyes turned to him. This was the question he'd been dreading. Sort of, he admitted. Mirror Moon helps me understand spatial relationships and predict how people will move, but the actual rescue work was all Ida and Todoroki. But you were guiding them, Yaoyorozu observed. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. I maybe gave them some tactical suggestions. Tactical suggestions, Bakugo repeated flatly, from the kid who was quirkless 3 weeks ago. The suspicion in his voice was unmistakable, and several other students picked up on it. The comfortable atmosphere in the room began to shift. It's just pattern recognition, Deku said desperately. I've studied hero tactics for years, so when I see a situation, I can usually figure out the most efficient approach. Pattern recognition, Todoroki said quietly, his mismatched eyes studying Deku with new intensity. Is that what you call it? Before Deku could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Impressive work today, subject 0, we should talk soon. A friend. Deku's blood turned to ice. Someone was watching him, someone who knew more about his abilities than they should, and they were using a designation that sounded distinctly governmental. I need to make a phone call, he said abruptly, standing up despite the lingering migraine. As he headed toward his room, he caught Bakugo's eye. His childhood friend was scowling, but there was something else there too. Concern, maybe, or recognition. King's Gambit, Bakugo said quietly, just loud enough for Deku to hear. The effect was immediate. Every active illusion Deku had been unconsciously maintaining, tiny things, mostly subtle adjustments to how people perceived light and shadow, vanished instantly. The world became flatter, more mundane. Thanks, Kachan, Deku whispered and meant it. But as he climbed the stairs to his room, he couldn't shake the memory of how natural the coordination had felt. How easy it had been to guide 30+ people without them ever realizing they were being guided. And how much the voice in his head had enjoyed every moment of it. In a government office across the city, an analyst replayed the shopping district footage for the 7th time, making detailed notes about response patterns and tactical adaptations. Confirmed Class S tactical integration, he murmured into his secure phone. Recommend immediate escalation to Phase 2 surveillance. Subject 0 is developing faster than projected. On his desk, a thick file labeled Aizen, SKEH Tactical Analysis, lay open to a page comparing historical battle footage with today's rescue operation. The similarities were unmistakable, and in the margins, someone had written in red ink, "He's remembering." Deku had always been observant. It came with the territory of being quirkless in a world full of superpowers. You learned to watch, to analyze, to spot the tells that warned you when someone was about to use their abilities on you. But this was different. Walking to school Monday morning, he caught glimpses of the same dark sedan in 3 different mirrors. A man in a coffee shop who seemed more interested in his newspaper than his cooling drink. A woman at the bus stop whose posture suggested military training despite her civilian clothes. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia. The shopping district incident had made him jumpy and the mysterious text message hadn't helped. But by lunch, the pattern was undeniable. Someone was watching him. "You're being unusually quiet today," Ida observed as they sat in the cafeteria. "Are you still experiencing effects from your quirk overuse?" "Something like that," Deku murmured, using the reflection in his spoon to check the tables behind them. There, a man in a maintenance uniform who'd been in the same spot for 20 minutes without actually doing any maintenance. "Interesting," the voice in his head commented with what sounded like approval. "You're developing proper situational awareness." "How? Nostalgic." Deku ignored the voice and focused on the more immediate problem. If he was being surveilled, it meant someone had decided he was worth watching. Given the timing, it was probably related to yesterday's rescue operation. "I'll catch up with you guys later," he said, standing abruptly. "Midoriya is everything," Todoroki began. "I'm fine. Just need some air." He left the cafeteria through the main exit, then doubled back through the side entrance, using his quirk to make himself less noticeable. Not invisible, that was beyond his current abilities, but forgettable. The kind of person eyes would slide past without really registering. The maintenance worker was still at his table, but now he was speaking quietly into a concealed microphone. Deku's blood ran cold. This wasn't casual surveillance. This was professional. Dr. Yamamoto's office felt more like an interrogation room than a medical facility. Stark white walls, uncomfortable chairs, and recording equipment that was supposedly for quality assurance purposes. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice, Midoriya," the woman said, settling behind her desk with a tablet full of official-looking forms. "I'm Dr. Yamamoto from the Hero Public Safety Commission's Quirk Assessment Division." "I thought my quirk assessment was already complete," Deku replied carefully. "Your school assessment, yes. But perception-based quirks require additional evaluation before full licensing can be approved." Her smile was professional but cold. Standard procedure. She pulled out a thick file with his name on it. Inside, Deku caught glimpses of photographs from the shopping district, psychological evaluation forms, and what looked like tactical analysis reports. Let's start with the basics. When did you first manifest your quirk? During the UA entrance exam. That's quite late for a first manifestation. Most quirks develop by age 4, she made a note. Any family history of perception-based abilities? No, ma'am. Genetic anomalies, unusual medical history, exposure to experimental quirk enhancement procedures. The questions came rapid fire, each one more invasive than the last. Deku answered as honestly as he could, but he could feel the conversation steering toward dangerous territory. "Now then," Dr. Yamamoto said, flipping to a new section of her file, "let's discuss your performance at the shopping district incident." She activated a tablet, showing aerial footage of the rescue operation. But this wasn't news footage. The angles were too perfect, the detail too clear. This was professional surveillance, recorded from multiple hidden positions. "Remarkable coordination for someone with such a recently manifested quirk," she noted. "The tactical awareness you displayed suggests years of training." "I study hero tactics as a hobby," Deku said, his mouth going dry. "Indeed, your analysis notebooks are quite comprehensive." She flipped through what looked like photocopies of his personal hero research. "Tell me, where did you learn to recognize weakness patterns in concrete-based transformation quirks?" Deku's heart began to race. Those notes were from his room in the dorms. They'd been watching him longer than he'd realized. I read about similar quirks online. Forums, hero databases, that kind of thing." Dr. Yamamoto pulled out another document. "This is a psychological profile based on your tactical decisions during the incident. Would you like to know what it says?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Subject demonstrates advanced spatial reasoning, predictive analysis capabilities, and manipulation techniques consistent with decades of practical experience. Decision-making patterns suggest someone accustomed to coordinating large-scale operations with minimal direct control." The room felt like it was shrinking around him. "Furthermore," she continued, "the specific tactical signatures match historical analysis patterns from several classified files." She slid a photograph across the desk. It was grainy, like it had been taken from old security footage, but the tactical formation was unmistakable. Multiple figures moving in perfect coordination, guided by subtle hand signals and spatial positioning. Deku had seen this exact pattern before, in memories that weren't his own. "This formation was used in a series of incidents roughly 40 years ago," Dr. Yamamoto said quietly. "Incidents involving someone with remarkable tactical abilities and a perception-based quirk that made him nearly impossible to track or counter." "I don't know what you're talking about," Deku whispered. "Don't you?" Her eyes were sharp as knives. "The coordination patterns are identical, Midoriya, down to the micro-movements and timing intervals. Either you've studied these classified files extensively, or," she leaned forward, "or you have access to memories that don't belong to you." The silence stretched between them like a loaded gun. Deku's hands were shaking, and he could feel sweat beating on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "She knows," the voice in his head said, and for the first time it sounded almost impressed. "Fascinating. It seems we've attracted the attention of someone with genuine analytical capabilities." "I want to speak to a lawyer," Deku said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "You're not under arrest," Dr. Yamamoto replied smoothly. "This is simply an evaluation, but if you'd prefer to involve legal counsel." She opened another file, this one thicker than the first. "We could discuss this with your mother present, perhaps at your family apartment, where we could conduct a more thorough investigation into your background and associates. The threat was clear. Cooperate or they'd involve his mother in whatever this was. What do you want to know? Deku asked quietly. The truth. She pulled out a photograph that made his blood freeze. It was a man with brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing what looked like a military uniform from decades past. The face was calm, intelligent, and completely familiar. Do you recognize this person? Deku stared at the photograph, and suddenly he was somewhere else entirely. Not the sterile office, but a place that looked like ancient Japan. Cherry blossoms falling like snow, and the sound of steel against steel in the distance. Since when were you under the impression that you were looking at the real me? The memory hit him like a physical blow. Not a fragment this time, but a complete scene. The man in the photograph standing before a group of shocked faces, his gentle smile never wavering as he revealed the depth of his deception. Captain Sasuke Aizen of the 5th Division. Brilliant, charismatic, and utterly without mercy when it came to achieving his goals. The man whose memories lived in Deku's head. Deku tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain that he remembered being this person? That sometimes, in quiet moments, he could feel Aizen's cold intelligence analyzing situations with calculating precision. His name was Sasuke Aizen, Dr. Yamamoto said when it became clear Deku wasn't going to answer. A tactical genius who used perception-based abilities to manipulate everyone around him. Friend, enemy, superior, subordinate, it didn't matter. They were all just pieces on his board. She leaned back in her chair, studying him with clinical detachment. He was responsible for countless deaths, Midoriya. Betrayed people who trusted him, manipulated allies into destroying each other, and came within inches of reshaping the world according to his personal vision. That's not me, Deku said desperately. I would never, wouldn't you? Dr. Yamamoto pulled out the shopping district footage again. Look at this coordination. Really look at it. 37 people moving exactly where you wanted them to move, seeing exactly what you wanted them to see. Tell me, did any of them consent to having their perception altered? Deku's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He'd followed his ethical guidelines, hadn't he? He'd only created safe paths, only helped people escape. You guided them without their knowledge, Dr. Yamamoto continued relentlessly. Made them believe they were making their own choices while you orchestrated every movement. How is that different from what Aizen did? Because I was saving them, the words burst out of him with more force than he'd intended. And I'm sure Aizen told himself something similar. Her voice was deadly quiet. That he knew what was best for everyone, that his superior intellect gave him the right to make decisions for others. The room began to feel smaller, the walls pressing in. Deku could hear his heartbeat in his ears, loud and fast and panicked. She's quite good, the voice observed with something like admiration. She understands exactly what buttons to press. How? Refreshing to encounter someone with genuine insight. Shut up, Deku whispered. Excuse me, I wasn't talking to you, Deku said quickly. I need a moment. But Dr. Yamamoto was watching him with new intensity. Are you experiencing auditory hallucinations, Midoriya, hearing voices that aren't there? No, it's not like that, Then what is it like? The question hung in the air. How could he explain the voice without sounding completely insane? How could he describe memories that felt as real as his own experiences? Sometimes, he said slowly, I remember things that happened to someone else. And sometimes that someone else offers opinions. Opinions about what? Tactical situations, people's motivations, he swallowed hard, how to manipulate them more effectively. Dr. Yamamoto made several notes on her tablet. And do you follow these suggestions? No, I mean sometimes the tactical analysis is useful, but I would never hurt people. What about the voice's opinion of our conversation right now? Deku hesitated. He could feel Aizen's amusement, his analytical appreciation for Dr. Yamamoto's interrogation technique. He thinks you're good at your job, Deku admitted quietly. The word slipped out before Deku could stop it. Now there was no pretending the voice was just random thoughts or psychological stress. Sasuke Aizen, Deku whispered. Sometimes I remember being him, and sometimes he talks to me. Dr. Yamamoto set down her tablet and pressed a button on her desk. Somewhere an alarm began to sound, not loud but persistent. Midoriya, I need you to remain calm, she said, her voice taking on the tone of someone speaking to a dangerous animal. What I'm about to tell you may be distressing. Security guards appeared in the doorway, 3 of them, all carrying quirk suppression equipment. Based on your responses today, I'm classifying you as a Class S psychological hazard pending further evaluation. You'll be transferred to a secure facility where, no. The word came out with more force than Deku had ever put into anything, not shouting, but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room take a step back. The air pressure in the office shifted, becoming thick and oppressive. The guards' hands moved instinctively to their weapons, and Dr. Yamamoto's eyes widened in what might have been fear. Excellent, the voice purred. Let them see what they're really dealing with. Deku stood slowly, and the pressure in the room intensified. Not physically, no quirk that could be measured or suppressed, something deeper. Something that bypassed the conscious mind and spoke directly to the primitive brain's threat assessment systems. I am not Sasuke Aizen, Deku said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that didn't belong to a 15-year-old boy. I am Izuku Midoriya, I choose to be a hero. One of the guards stumbled backward, his face pale with sudden, inexplicable terror. But Deku continued, the pressure continuing to build. If you try to imprison me for crimes I haven't committed and memories that aren't even fully mine, you will discover exactly why Aizen was considered so dangerous. Dr. Yamamoto pressed another button on her desk, probably a panic alarm. But her hands were shaking, and Deku could see the sweat beading on her forehead. The pressure reached its peak and then vanished instantly, leaving everyone gasping as if they'd been holding their breath underwater. I'll be going now, Deku said, his voice returning to its normal pitch. If you want to continue this conversation, you can contact me through UA's administration. With proper legal representation present. He walked past the security guards, who seemed frozen in place, and out of the office. It wasn't until he was 3 blocks away that the shaking started. The UA faculty building had never felt more like a sanctuary. Deku sat in All Might's office, trying to process what had happened while his mentor paced back and forth with barely contained energy. They had no right, All Might was saying, his civilian form somehow more intimidating when angry than his hero persona. Psychological evaluation without proper supervision, coercive questioning of a minor, threats against family members, this is completely outside protocol. They knew about Aizen, Deku said quietly. They had files, photographs, tactical analysis. They've been watching me since the entrance exam. All Might stopped pacing. What exactly did you remember? Everything. Deku looked up at his mentor with haunted eyes. His name, his crimes, his philosophy. I remember being someone who thought other people were just tools to be used. But you're not him, aren't I? Deku's voice cracked. I used my quirk on 37 people without their consent. I manipulated their perceptions to make them do what I wanted. How is that different? Because you saved their lives, All Might said firmly. Because your goal was their safety, not your own benefit. Aizen probably told himself his goals were justified too. All Might sat down across from Deku, his blue eyes serious but kind. Maybe. But here's the difference, you're questioning your actions. You're worried about the ethical implications. Aizen, from what you've told me, never did that. Deku nodded, but he wasn't sure he believed it. There's something else, he said. At the end, when they tried to arrest me, I did something, some kind of pressure effect that scared everyone in the room. It felt like what? Like I could have hurt them if I wanted to, really hurt them. And part of me, he swallowed hard, part of me wanted to see what would happen if I did. All Might was quiet for a long moment. Power without restraint is dangerous, he finally said. But power with too much restraint can be equally dangerous to the people you're trying to protect. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the UA campus. I think it's time we involved Principal Nezu in this situation. And possibly some legal counsel. If the HPSC is targeting you specifically, we need to understand what they know and what they're planning. What if they're right? Deku asked desperately. What if I am dangerous? What if these memories turn me into someone like him? All Might turned back to him with a smile that was gentle but absolutely certain. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. You're not facing this alone, young Midoriya. UA protects its students, all of its students, no matter how complicated their situations might be. But as Deku left the office, he couldn't shake the memory of how good it had felt to see fear in Dr. Yamamoto's eyes. How natural it had been to project that overwhelming presence. And in the back of his mind, Aizen's voice whispered, "See how easily they bend when confronted with true power. This is only the beginning of what we could accomplish." For the first time since the memories had started, Deku found himself listening. In a secure government facility across the city, Dr. Yamamoto reviewed footage of their encounter with growing excitement. Confirmed Class S manifestation, she reported to her superior. Subject 0 demonstrated advanced intimidation techniques and possible pressure-based secondary abilities. Recommend immediate escalation to Phase 3 containment protocols. On her desk, Aizen's file lay open to a page titled Reiatsu Manifestation and Psychological Warfare Applications. The hunt was about to become much more dangerous. The morning news played on every screen in the UA common room as Class 1A ate breakfast. Deku tried to ignore it, but the headline made his stomach drop. Mind Control Hero. Government questions students' dangerous abilities. The report was brutal. Footage from his encounter with Dr. Yamamoto, somehow obtained despite the supposed confidentiality, showed him projecting that intimidating presence while security guards cowered. The narration painted him as a potential threat masquerading as a hero student. "This is insane," Kirishima said, gesturing at the TV. "They're making you sound like a villain. Public opinion can be manipulated easily," Bakugo muttered from across the room. "Especially when people are already scared." Deku appreciated the support, but he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe the news wasn't entirely wrong. The memory of how good it had felt to frighten Dr. Yamamoto still haunted him. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Channel 7 will be covering a building collapse downtown in 20 minutes. Might be a good opportunity to show them who you really are." A friend before Deku could process the implications, alarms began blaring throughout the dormitory. "Emergency response drill," Ida announced, already in full class representative mode. "All students to report for immediate deployment." The collapsed office building dominated the downtown skyline like a concrete gravestone. 7 stories had pancaked into 3, trapping dozens of office workers in the twisted wreckage. Smoke rose from several points, suggesting electrical fires spreading through the debris. But what caught Deku's attention were the news vans. Every major network was present, cameras positioned for optimal coverage of the rescue operation. This wasn't just an emergency, it was a media event. "Students will assist with perimeter control and civilian evacuation," Aizawa announced over the noise of approaching helicopters. "No unauthorized heroics. You follow orders and stay out of the professionals' way." The pro-heroes were already coordinating their assault on the building. Best Jeanist worked to stabilize the structure with his fiber control, while Cementos created access routes through the debris. It was textbook rescue operation planning, except for one problem. "The East Wing is completely cut off," Endeavor reported over the comm system. "Structural integrity is too compromised for direct access, and there are at least 12 people trapped in the accounting department." Deku found himself studying the building's layout with the cold analytical precision that had become second nature. The access problem wasn't insurmountable. There were multiple approach angles the pros were missing, alternative routes that could be opened with the right coordination. "Such limited thinking," the voice in his head observed. "They're approaching this as a structural engineering problem when it's clearly a perception management issue." "What do you mean?" Deku whispered. "The civilians are panicking, which makes them harder to extract. Their fear is causing them to cluster in the worst possible locations. Guide their perceptions and you guide their movements." Deku looked at the cameras surrounding the scene. This could be his chance to show everyone that his abilities were heroic, not villainous. One successful rescue operation broadcast live might counter weeks of negative press. "Midoriya," Todoroki appeared at his elbow. "You're analyzing the building." "There might be a way to help," Deku said slowly. "The trapped civilians, if I could coordinate their movements, guide them to safer positions." "That would require using your quirk on a large scale," Ida warned. "Are you certain that's advisable given recent events?" Through the police barriers, Deku could see reporters setting up for live broadcasts. One of them was speaking directly to camera. "Questions about UA student Izuku Midoriya's dangerous abilities have reached a fever pitch, and now he's here at this tragic scene. Will he prove himself a hero or confirm the public's worst fears?" The pressure was enormous. Hundreds of watching eyes, both in person and through television cameras. His entire future as a hero might depend on the next few minutes. "I can do this," Deku said, as much to himself as to his classmates. The plan should have worked perfectly. Deku positioned himself where he could see the building's eastern section, activated his quirk with surgical precision, and began creating gentle perceptual guidance for the trapped civilians. To the woman trapped behind the water cooler, a path toward the stairwell became more noticeable. To the man pinned under his desk, the sound of rescue workers seemed to come from a specific direction. Small nudges, barely perceptible, designed to move people towards safer positions without them realizing they were being influenced. The cameras captured everything. The careful hand gestures, the intense concentration, the gradual movement of heat signatures on the thermal imaging displays as civilians shifted toward extraction points. For 8 minutes, it worked flawlessly. Civilian after civilian was pulled from the wreckage, guided to safety by illusions so subtle that even the rescue workers didn't realize they were being assisted. Then came the moment that changed everything. A middle-aged man in a torn business suit stumbled out of the building, blood running from a head wound and his eyes wide with shock. The reporters immediately surrounded him, shoving microphones in his face. "Sir, can you tell us what happened inside? How did you find your way out?" The man blinked rapidly, his expression confused. "I don't. I was trapped under my desk and then, did someone help me? There was a voice, but I can't remember." Deku felt ice form in his veins. Something was wrong with the man's memory, something beyond normal shock and confusion. "What do you remember about the rescue?" a reporter pressed. "Nothing." The man's voice rose to near panic. "I remember being trapped and then I remember being outside, but everything in between is gone. Someone took my memories." The crowd of reporters turned as one toward Deku, cameras swiveling to focus on him with laser intensity. "Mr. Midoriya," a reporter thrust her microphone toward him. "Did you alter this man's memories during the rescue?" No, I would never," Deku stammered, but even as he spoke, he could feel something wrong with his quirk. The illusions weren't fading cleanly, they were leaving traces, fragments that interfered with the natural memory formation process. More survivors were being brought out, and their accounts were disturbingly similar. Gaps in memory, confusion about how they'd escaped, a sense that something had guided them that they couldn't quite recall. "Oh God," Deku whispered, the full implications hitting him. "I didn't mean to." "Mind control," someone in the crowd shouted. "He's erasing their memories." What happened next was like watching a nightmare unfold in real time. The crowd of civilians behind the police barriers began to surge backward, fear spreading through them like wildfire. Parents pulled their children away from the scene. The rescued office workers looked at Deku with expressions of terror and betrayal. And through it all, the cameras kept rolling. "This is Yuki Tanaka reporting live," a news anchor said breathlessly, "where we're witnessing what appears to be confirmation of the worst fears about UA student Izuku Midoriya's abilities. Multiple witnesses report memory loss after being exposed to his quirk." Deku tried to explain, tried to tell them it was an accident, that he'd never intended to affect anyone's memories. But his words were drowned out by the growing chaos of the scene. "How disappointing," Aizen's voice murmured in his head. "Such sloppy technique. If you're going to manipulate people's minds, at least do it properly." "I wasn't trying to manipulate anyone," Deku said aloud, not caring who heard him. But the damage was done. In minutes, what should have been his redemption had become his downfall. The news reports that Knight would focus on one thing, the mind control hero, who stole memories from the people he was supposed to save. The UA faculty meeting room felt like a tribunal. Principal Nezu sat at the head of the table, his perpetually cheerful expression unusually subdued. Around him, the entire teaching staff watched Deku with expressions ranging from concern to outright wariness. "Explain to me exactly what happened," Nezu said quietly. Deku tried to walk them through the rescue operation step by step, but the words felt inadequate. How could he explain that his quirk had malfunctioned in exactly the way that would cause the most public relations damage? "The memory interference appears to have been unintentional," Recovery Girl observed, reviewing medical reports from the hospital. "A side effect of overextended quirk usage rather than deliberate manipulation." "Intent doesn't matter to the public," Vlad King said grimly. "The optics are catastrophic. Parents are already calling to pull their children from UA. The Hero Public Safety Commission has requested an immediate review of Midoriya's enrollment status," Midnight added, sliding a thick document across the table. "They're suggesting suspension pending comprehensive psychological evaluation." Deku stared at the papers, the words blurring together. Suspension, evaluation, the end of his dreams before they'd really begun. "I can fix this," he said desperately. "I'll train harder, develop better control. The problem isn't your control," Aizawa interrupted, his voice flat with exhaustion. "The problem is that the public no longer trusts you. And heroes without public trust are just vigilantes waiting to happen." "So what are you saying?" All Might asked from across the table, his civilian form tense with suppressed emotion. "I'm saying," Principal Nezu replied carefully, "that we need to seriously consider whether continuing Midoriya's enrollment serves the school's mission or the public interest." The words hit Deku like a physical blow. He'd known this was possible, but hearing it said aloud made it real in a way that terrified him. "He saved 12 people today," Todoroki said suddenly from his position by the door, where he'd been waiting with the other concerned classmates. Whatever problems there were with his technique, the result was 12 families that still have their loved ones. "Todoroki-kun," Nezu said gently, "this is a faculty meeting." "With respect, sir," Ida stepped forward, his usual formality replaced by genuine passion. "Midoriya-kun has shown nothing but heroic intent since arriving at UA. Condemning him for an accident would be a grave injustice." More students appeared in the doorway. Uraraka Tsuyu, even Bakugo lurked in the background with his usual scowl, though Deku noticed it seemed directed at the faculty rather than him. "The public safety concerns are valid," All Might said quietly. "But so is our responsibility to our students. Midoriya didn't choose to have these abilities or these memories. Abandoning him now would be abandoning everything we claim to stand for as heroes." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Principal Nezu spoke. "Very well. Midoriya-kun, you have 48 hours to prepare a presentation for the HPSC Review Board. You will need to demonstrate complete control over your abilities, present a comprehensive safety protocol, and convince them that you pose no threat to public welfare." "And if I can't," Nezu's expression was kind but implacable, "then I'm afraid your time at UA will come to an end." Deku's room felt like a prison cell. The blinds were drawn against the reporters camped outside the dorms, and his phone had been buzzing non-stop with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He sat on his bed, staring at the notebook All Might had given him weeks ago. The consent doctrine they'd written together felt naive now, inadequate for the complexity of what his quirk could actually do. "Such melodrama," Aizen's voice observed with what sounded like amusement. "One minor setback and you're ready to surrender completely." "Minor setback," Deku whispered harshly. "I violated people's minds. I stole their memories, accidentally, and in service of saving their lives, you're being far too hard on yourself. People are terrified of me. The government wants me locked up. My classmates probably think I'm dangerous. Some of them perhaps, but did you see the way they stood up for you in that meeting? True loyalty is rare, you know. Most people would have abandoned you at the first sign of public disapproval." Deku looked toward his door, remembering the expressions on his classmates' faces. Even Bakugo, in his own gruff way, had shown support. "The question is, what will you do now? Sulk in your room like a punished child or take control of your circumstances?" "What do you mean? You have power, Izuku." "Real power, the kind that could reshape society if properly applied. These bureaucrats and reporters who seek to judge you, they're only obstacles because you allow them to be." The voice was seductive, reasonable, offering simple solutions to complex problems. All Deku had to do was embrace his abilities fully, stop limiting himself with unnecessary ethical constraints. "No," he said firmly, "I won't become you. You wouldn't be becoming me. You'd be becoming the best possible version of yourself, someone who doesn't beg for approval from lesser minds." A knock at his door interrupted the internal debate. "Deku," it was Uraraka's voice, soft and concerned. "Can we come in?" He opened the door to find not just Uraraka, but most of Class 1A crowded in the hallway. They looked tired, worried, but not afraid. "We saw the news," Tsuyu said in her typically direct way. "It was clearly an accident. The media's blowing everything out of proportion," Kirishima added. "That's what they do." "Indeed," Ida's engines revved with indignation. "The suggestion that you would deliberately harm civilians is preposterous to anyone who knows your character." Even Bakugo stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You screwed up," he said bluntly. "But heroes screw up sometimes. What matters is what you do next." Deku felt tears prick at his eyes. After everything that had happened, they still believed in him. "What if the review board doesn't see it that way?" he asked. "Then we'll figure something else out," Uraraka said firmly. "You're not facing this alone." "How touching," Aizen's voice murmured. "But ultimately irrelevant. Their support won't matter if you can't demonstrate the kind of control the authorities demand." For once, the voice was probably right. Good intentions wouldn't be enough for the HPSC Review Board. He needed to show them something more: complete mastery, absolute safety, perfect control. Or maybe he needed to show them something else entirely. "I have an idea," Deku said slowly, "but it's going to require trusting me completely, even when you can't see what I'm doing." His classmates exchanged glances. "We trust you," Todoroki said simply. And despite everything, the public fear, the government scrutiny, the voice in his head whispering temptations, Deku felt something settle in his chest. Not confidence exactly, but determination. He had 48 hours to prove he could be a hero despite carrying a villain's memories. Time to get to work. The training room hummed with nervous energy as Class 1A gathered for what Aizawa had cryptically called specialized coordination exercises. Deku sat in the center of the space, surrounded by his classmates in a rough circle, feeling like he was about to undergo some kind of intervention. Which he supposed he was. Before we begin, Aizawa said, his tired eyes more serious than usual, everyone needs to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Midoriya, tell them. Deku's throat went dry. They discussed this approach during the faculty meeting, radical transparency as the foundation for trust. But explaining Aizen's memories to his classmates felt like admitting to being possessed by a malevolent spirit. You all know my quirk affects perception, he began slowly. What you don't know is where those abilities come from. He pulled out his phone and showed them the photograph Dr. Yamamoto had presented, the same calm face with wire-rimmed glasses that haunted his dreams. This is Sasuke Aizen. 40 years ago he was someone very dangerous, someone who used abilities similar to mine to manipulate and betray people who trusted him. Kirishima leaned forward, his expression concerned. You're talking about him like he's a real person, man. He was, and sometimes, Deku took a shaky breath. Sometimes I remember being him, his memories, his knowledge, his way of thinking, it's all in my head. The silence that followed was deafening. So you're saying, Kaminari said slowly, that you've got the memories of some ancient villain just living in your brain? That's insane, Mineta squeaked. How is that even possible? Quirks can manifest in unusual ways, Yaoyorozu observed thoughtfully. Genetic memory storage, past life recall, psychic imprinting, there are documented cases. The how doesn't matter, Bakugo said harshly, drawing everyone's attention. What matters is what Deku does with it. He stood up and moved to face Deku directly, his expression more serious than anyone had ever seen it. I've known this idiot my whole life, Bakugo continued. And yeah, lately he's been different, smarter in ways that don't make sense, more calculating, his jaw tightened. But he's still the same kid who jumped at that sludge villain to save me without thinking twice. Kach-chan, shut up, I'm not done. Bakugo's red eyes were intense. You want to know the real difference between Deku and this Aizen bastard? Deku's scared of becoming him. Aizen probably never questioned himself for a second. How perceptive, the voice in Deku's head murmured with what sounded like approval. Your friend understands the fundamental nature of power better than most adults. There's something else, Deku said, pushing the voice aside. Sometimes he talks to me. Offers advice, suggests strategies, comments on situations. Several classmates shifted uncomfortably. What kind of advice? Tsuyu asked, her large eyes studying him carefully. How to manipulate people more effectively. How to use my quirk for maximum psychological impact. How to, he swallowed hard, how to stop limiting myself with unnecessary moral constraints. And do you listen to him? Todoroki's voice was carefully neutral. I try not to, but sometimes his tactical analysis is useful. He understands patterns, weaknesses, ways to solve problems that I wouldn't think of on my own. Such as the current solution to your trust deficit, Aizen's voice suggested. Complete transparency is a fascinating gambit, risky but potentially quite effective. He's commenting on this conversation right now, isn't he? Bakugo said, watching Deku's micro-expressions with sharp attention. Deku nodded reluctantly. What's he saying? That this level of honesty is risky but potentially effective for building trust. Bakugo snorted. At least he's not stupid. Manipulative bastard, but not stupid. The casual way Bakugo addressed the voice in Deku's head seemed to diffuse some of the tension in the room. If Bakugo could treat it as just another tactical consideration rather than some supernatural horror, maybe it wasn't as terrifying as it seemed. So what's the plan? Uraraka asked, her usual cheerfulness tempered by concern. How do we help you prove to the review board that you're safe? That's why we're here, Aizawa interjected. We're going to establish protocols that ensure Midoriya's abilities can never be used without appropriate safeguards. The kill word system had worked during their informal interactions, but formalizing it felt different. More serious, more permanent. King's Gambit, Bakugo said clearly, standing in front of the entire class. When I say those words, everything stops. Every illusion, every perception effect, every bit of mental influence gone immediately. And if you're not available, Aizawa asked. Then Icy Hot takes over, Bakugo replied, jerking his thumb toward Todoroki. He's observant enough to spot when Deku's quirk is acting up. I accept that responsibility, Todoroki said formally. What about the rest of us? Jiro asked. How do we know when we're being affected? This was the heart of the problem. Deku's quirk worked by being unnoticeable. If people could easily detect it, it wouldn't be effective. But that same subtlety made it impossible for targets to give informed consent. "We practice," Deku said. "I'm going to use my quirk on all of you with your permission so you can learn what it feels like." He activated Mirror Moon, starting with simple effects, making Kirishima think he was sitting 3 feet to the left of his actual position, convincing Kaminari that the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees, causing Mina to hear her favorite song playing faintly in the background. "Whoa," Kaminari rubbed his arms. "That's so weird. I know it's not actually cold, but I can feel it anyway." "It's like a gentle push," Kirishima observed, blinking rapidly as the position illusion faded. "Not controlling my thoughts, just suggesting a different way to see things." The auditory effect was remarkably convincing, Yao Yorozu noted. "If I hadn't known to expect it, I would have assumed someone was actually playing music." They spent an hour running through different scenarios, with Deku demonstrating various applications of his abilities while his classmates learned to recognize the subtle signs of perception manipulation. The tingle at the back of the neck, the moment of confusion when reality didn't quite match expectation, the sense that something was slightly off without being able to pinpoint what. "Now for the hard part," Aizawa announced. "Combat coordination without visual cues." He activated his quirk, and suddenly Deku's abilities shut off completely. The world became flatter, more mundane, stripped of the subtle spatial awareness that had become second nature. "In a real emergency, your quirk might be compromised," Aizawa explained. "Either by my erasure, by quirk-suppressing technology, or by opponents who can resist perception effects. You need to be able to function as a team leader without relying on mental influence." They ran drill after drill, coordinating rescue operations using only hand signals and verbal cues, learning to read each other's body language and movement patterns, developing a shared tactical vocabulary that didn't require supernatural insight to understand. It was brutally difficult. Without his quirk's subtle guidance, Deku felt like he was trying to conduct an orchestra while wearing mittens. His classmates stumbled through maneuvers that should have been simple, lacking the unconscious coordination that perception effects normally provided. But gradually, something else emerged, trust built through shared struggle, understanding based on genuine communication rather than mental manipulation. The kind of teamwork that couldn't be faked or forced, only earned. "Better," Aizawa said after their 6th iteration of a complex rescue scenario. "Again, how tedious," Aizen's voice commented during a brief rest. "All this effort to accomplish what could be done so much more efficiently with proper application of your abilities." "Efficiency isn't the point," Deku whispered back. "Isn't it? These people you call friends, do you think they would maintain their loyalty if they truly understood what you could do to them?" "Yes," Deku said without hesitation. "I do. Such faith. I wonder if it's justified." Bakugo appeared at his elbow, having caught the tail end of the whispered conversation. "He's being an ass again, isn't he?" Bakugo said bluntly. "Pretty much, King's Gambit." The effect was immediate and startling, not just the shutdown of his quirk but the sudden absence of Aizen's voice, complete mental silence for the first time in weeks. "Better?" Bakugo asked. "Yeah. Thanks, don't thank me yet. We've still got to convince a bunch of government stiffs that you're not going to mind control half of Japan." The news played quietly on the training room's wall-mounted TV during their dinner break. Most of it was the usual coverage of their situation, experts debating the ethics of perception quirks, interviews with the civilians from the building collapse, speculation about Deku's future at UA. But then came something different. "In other news," the anchor said, "authorities are investigating a series of unusual incidents across the city. Multiple reports of mass confusion, memory gaps, and coordinated behavior among large groups of civilians." The footage was shaky, obviously taken by bystanders with phone cameras. A crowd of people in a subway station, all walking in perfect synchronization toward the same exit. Shoppers in a mall suddenly abandoning their purchases and filing out in orderly lines. Pedestrians on a busy street corner standing motionless for exactly 3 minutes before resuming their activities as if nothing had happened. Witnesses describe feeling compelled to act without understanding why, the reporter continued. Medical examinations have found no evidence of chemical or biological influence, leading some experts to suggest a quirk-based cause. Deku's blood ran cold. The coordination patterns, the mass psychological effects, the precise timing, it all looked familiar. not from his own experiences, but from memories that weren't his. How interesting, Aizen's voice had returned, sounding genuinely intrigued. It seems someone else has been studying our methods. That's not possible, Deku said aloud, drawing concerned looks from his classmates. You're just memories. You can't have methods that exist in the real world. Can't I? Tell me, where do you think these memories came from? Random neural firing? Genetic accident? The question hung in Deku's mind like a blade. He'd never really thought about the mechanism behind the memories, just accepted them as another Quirk oddity in a world full of supernatural phenomena. What are you suggesting? That perhaps I'm not as gone as everyone assumes. That perhaps these incidents are connected to something much larger than your personal struggles with power and responsibility. Deku, Todoroki's voice cut through his internal conversation. You're talking to him again. All eyes turned to him. The easy camaraderie of the training sessions suddenly felt fragile. He thinks, Deku said slowly, that these incidents might be connected to him somehow, to his continued existence. The room went quiet except for the TV, which was now showing expert analysis of the coordination patterns observed in the incidents. That's impossible, Yaoyorozu said firmly. Quirks can produce many unusual effects, but they can't resurrect deceased individuals. Unless, Ida added thoughtfully, they never actually died. If the original Aizen found a way to preserve his consciousness through some form of quirk-based mechanism. You're talking about ghosts, Kaminari protested. Actual ghosts, not ghosts, Aizen's voice corrected, though only Deku could hear it. Something far more sophisticated, but now is not the time for lengthy explanations. Focus on the immediate problem. Someone is using techniques derived from my research, and they're not being subtle about it. Deku relayed the message, and saw understanding dawn on several faces. If there's someone out there with abilities like yours, Tsuyu said pragmatically, but without your ethical constraints. It could be a disaster, Aizawa finished, his expression grim. Mass psychological manipulation on a citywide scale. Which means, Bakugo said with characteristic directness, that you might be the only one who can stop them. The implication was clear. Just when Deku was trying to prove he wasn't dangerous, the world might need him to be exactly as dangerous as everyone feared. His phone buzzed with a text from Principal Nezu. Review board meeting moved up to tomorrow morning. New evidence has come to light. Come prepared to discuss your knowledge of large-scale perception manipulation techniques. Deku stared at the message, understanding that his 48 hours had just become 12. How exciting, Aizen's voice murmured. It seems the game is about to begin in earnest. And for the first time since the memories had started, Deku found himself hoping that Aizen's tactical expertise would be enough to handle whatever was coming. Because if the incidents on the news were any indication, they were all about to face something much worse than government oversight and public distrust. They were about to face the return of Aizen's true legacy. The Hero Public Safety Commission building looked more like a fortress than a government office at 6 in the morning. Deku stood before its imposing entrance, flanked by All Might, and a lawyer Nezu had insisted on bringing, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in quirk discrimination cases. Remember, All Might said quietly, you're not on trial here, you're demonstrating competence. And if that doesn't work, the lawyer added with a thin smile, we fall back on the constitutional protections for quirk-based minorities. Deku nodded, but his attention was elsewhere. The city felt wrong this morning, a subtle tension in the air that reminded him uncomfortably of the moments before Aizen's most devastating manipulations. You sense it too, the voice in his head observed. The psychological pressure building across the urban population. Someone is preparing for something significant. Before Deku could respond, his phone exploded with alerts. Emergency broadcasts, news notifications, social media updates, all pointing to the same location. Musutafu Shopping District, All Might read from his own phone, his expression growing grave. Mass psychological event in progress, all available heroes requested for immediate response. The lawyer was already on her phone with the commission. The review board is postponing pending resolution of the current emergency, she announced. They want you on scene as a consultant. A consultant, Deku asked. Someone who understands perception-based mass manipulation, All Might said grimly. Because whatever's happening out there, they think it's connected to your abilities. The shopping district looked like a scene from a nightmare. Thousands of people moved in perfect synchronization through the streets, their faces blank and their movements unnaturally coordinated. They weren't panicking or running, They were walking in complex geometric patterns that made no apparent sense. Victim count is estimated at over 3,000, Best Jeanist reported as heroes gathered at the emergency command center. No physical injuries, but complete psychological coordination. They're not responding to external stimuli. It's like they're all following the same invisible choreographer, MT Lady observed, watching the crowd through high-powered binoculars. Deku studied the movement patterns, feeling a chill of recognition run down his spine. The precision, the complexity, the way individual actions served a larger design that was invisible to casual observation. It was textbook Aizen. Quite impressive, the voice admitted. Whoever is doing this has studied my techniques extensively, though their execution lacks a certain elegance. Can you tell what they're trying to accomplish? Deku whispered. Pattern suggests a resonance amplification array. They're using the crowd's combined psychological energy to enhance whatever effect they're generating, rather like tuning a massive instrument. To what end? That remains to be seen. Endeavor approached their position, his flames dim but ready. You a brat, he said without preamble. Can you break this thing? I don't know, Deku replied honestly. My quirk affects individual perception. This is bigger. How much bigger? Hawks asked, landing beside them with a flutter of red feathers. Deku closed his eyes and extended his spatial awareness as far as it would go. The sensation that came back made him stagger. The entire district, he gasped. Maybe 15,000 people total. All connected somehow, all moving according to the same pattern. That's impossible, Kamui Woods protested. No known quirk can affect that many people simultaneously. No single quirk, perhaps, Aizen's voice mused. But a properly constructed amplification system could theoretically extend one's range indefinitely. Fascinating. A new sound cut through the ambient noise of the coordinated crowd, a low, thrumming hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. What is that? MT Lady asked. The hum intensified, and suddenly Deku could feel it in his bones. Not just sound, but some kind of resonant frequency that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke to something deeper in the human psyche. Ah, Aizen's voice sounded almost impressed. Now I understand. They're not just controlling the crowd, they're using the crowd to generate a secondary effect, a form of artificially induced desire amplification. Desire amplification, Deku said aloud. You know what this is? Endeavor demanded. It's based on research from before, Deku explained, struggling to put Aizen's memories into his own words. The idea is that if you can synchronize enough human minds, their combined psychological energy becomes powerful enough to alter reality on a small scale. Alter reality how? Hawks asked. Before Deku could answer, the coordinated crowd suddenly stopped moving. Thousands of people stood perfectly still in their geometric formations, and the humming sound reached a crescendo that made several heroes wince. Then the air above the shopping district began to shimmer. What the hell is that? MT Lady pointed upward, where something like a heat mirage was forming in the clear morning sky. The shimmer solidified into a massive projection, a figure in flowing robes with a calm, intelligent face that Deku recognized with growing horror. Greetings, the projection said in a voice that carried across the entire district without amplification. I am the one who has inherited the true legacy of Sasuke Aizen, and I have a message for the pretender who claims his memories. Every hero turned to stare at Deku. Young man, the projection continued, you have impressed me with your restraint, your ethical limitations, your determination to use power responsibly. The voice carried a note of mocking amusement. How utterly disappointing. The humming intensified again, and the coordinated crowd began moving in new patterns, more complex, more purposeful. Aizen's true genius was not in his individual techniques, but in his understanding of desire itself. The way consciousness shapes reality through will and intention, you possess his memories, but you have learned nothing from them. Deku felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you want? To show you what real power looks like, the projection replied. To demonstrate what you could accomplish if you stopped limiting yourself with meaningless moral constraints. The crowd's movements reached a new level of coordination, and suddenly the air itself began to change. Colors became more vivid, sounds carried further, and everyone watching felt a strange sense of euphoria building in their chests. Mass psychological amplification, Deku realized with growing horror. He's making everyone in the district feel whatever he wants them to feel. More than that, Aizen's voice said quietly, he's preparing to make them believe whatever he wants them to believe. With enough coordinated psychic energy, temporary reality alteration becomes possible. Can you stop it? All Might asked urgently. Deku looked at the thousands of coordinated people, the massive projection dominating the sky, the reality distortion effects spreading outward from the district center. Not alone, he admitted, but maybe. He turned to face the assembled heroes, making a decision that would have terrified him a week ago. "I need you to trust me completely," he said. "And I need you to let me coordinate your abilities in ways that might feel invasive." "Invasive how?" Endeavor demanded. "I'm going to have to use my quirk on all of you. Create a shared tactical awareness that lets us function as a single coordinated unit." Deku's voice was steady despite the magnitude of what he was proposing. "It's the only way to match what they're doing." The heroes exchanged glances. "That's a massive violation of protocol," Best Jeanist pointed out. "Protocol isn't going to save 15,000 civilians," Hawks replied pragmatically. "Do it," Endeavor said bluntly. "Just make it fast." Coordinating a dozen professional heroes was nothing like working with his classmates. These were experienced combatants with established techniques, ingrained tactical preferences, and the kind of situational awareness that came from years of life-or-death encounters. Deku had to approach each one differently. For Endeavor, he created a tactical overlay that highlighted optimal flame placement for maximum psychological impact without physical harm to civilians. For Hawks, he provided enhanced spatial awareness that let the winged hero track crowd movements from above while coordinating with ground-based responses. For Best Jeanist, he generated fiberpath visualizations that showed exactly how to create barriers and guidance structures that would feel natural rather than imprisoning to the affected civilians. The coordination was exhausting, like trying to conduct an orchestra while simultaneously playing every instrument. But it worked. Within minutes, the heroes were moving with the same kind of unconscious precision that had made the shopping district rescue possible. Phase 1, Deku announced through the shared tactical channel. Create counter-resonance patterns. We need to disrupt their synchronization without causing panic. Hawks took to the air, using his feathers to create subtle wind patterns that broke up the crowd's geometric formations. Best Jeanist's fibers wove between the coordinated people, gently guiding them toward less organized groupings. Endeavor's flames provided psychological pressure points that made standing in formation feel uncomfortable without seeming threatening. "It's working," MT Lady reported. "The coordination is breaking down, but the projection above them only laughed. Crude but effective," it acknowledged. "You're learning to think tactically, young Aizen. But you're still fighting the wrong battle." The humming sound changed pitch, becoming higher and more urgent. The reality distortion effects intensified, and suddenly the heroes found their own perceptions beginning to shift. "He's targeting us directly," Kamui Woods warned, his voice strained. Deku felt it too, a subtle pressure at the edges of his mind, something trying to convince him that up was down, that his allies were enemies, that the mission was already lost. "Impressive technique," Aizen's voice observed clinically. "Direct psychological assault on command personnel, I approve." "Can you help me resist it?" Deku asked desperately. "I could. But perhaps this is an opportunity for you to understand what you're truly capable of." "What do you mean? Stop defending, start attacking. Show this pretender what real tactical coordination looks like." Deku hesitated. Everything in his training told him to minimize collateral damage, to use only the force necessary, to prioritize civilian safety above all else. But 15,000 people were trapped in a mass psychological manipulation that was growing stronger by the minute. "All units," he said through the tactical channel, "switching to Phase 2, aggressive countermeasures." What happened next would be analyzed by tactical experts for years to come. Instead of trying to break the enemy's coordination gradually, Deku created what could only be described as a perception storm. Illusions layered on illusions, reality distortions that countered reality distortions, a massive display of coordinated psychological warfare that turned the shopping district into a battlefield of competing mental influences. The heroes moved through this chaos like dancers in a choreographed performance, each action perfectly timed to support the others. Endeavor's flames became psychological beacons that drew civilians toward safety. Hawk's feathers created wind patterns that felt like guidance from benevolent spirits. Best Jeanist's barriers materialized as protective cocoons that promised security. And through it all, Deku maintained the tactical coordination that made it possible, pushing his quirk far beyond any safe operational limits. "The projection is destabilizing," MT Lady called out. The massive figure in the sky was indeed flickering, its voice becoming distorted as the coordinated crowd broke apart into confused but free individuals. "This is not over." the projection said as it faded. You have shown me what you can do when properly motivated, young Aizen. Next time I will be ready for your evolved approach. The humming stopped abruptly, and the reality distortions collapsed like soap bubbles. Deku felt his knees give out as the tactical coordination network shut down. Blood trickled from his nose, and his vision was fragmenting at the edges from Quirk overuse. But 15,000 civilians were safe, confused but unharmed. Medical, All Might called urgently, catching Deku before he could fall completely. I'm okay, Deku managed through gritted teeth. Just push too hard. You did well, Aizen's voice said with what sounded like genuine approval. That was closer to true tactical mastery than anything you've accomplished before. The heroes, Deku said weakly. Are they? We're fine, kid, Endeavor said, though he was looking at Deku with new respect. Whatever you did, it worked. That was some of the most effective coordination I've ever experienced. The question is, Hawks added, who was behind that projection? And how did they know so much about historical techniques? Deku's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Impressive work, Subject 0. You're finally beginning to understand your true potential. Soon we'll meet in person and I'll show you what else you could accomplish if you stopped limiting yourself. The true heir, he showed the message to All Might, who frowned deeply. This isn't over, All Might said quietly. No, Deku agreed, remembering the casual way the projection had demonstrated city-scale psychological manipulation. It's just beginning. Indeed, Aizen's voice murmured in his head. And the next encounter will be far more interesting than this preliminary test. As medical personnel arrived to check the heroes for psychological damage, Deku found himself wondering whether today's victory had been worth the cost. He'd shown the world that he could coordinate tactical operations on a massive scale, that his abilities could counter threats no other hero could handle. But he'd also shown that, when properly motivated, he was capable of exactly the kind of large-scale psychological manipulation that everyone had been afraid of. The line between hero and villain had never felt thinner, and somewhere in the city, the true heir was already planning their next move. The HPSC meeting room felt different this time. Instead of the sterile interrogation atmosphere Deku remembered, there was an urgency in the air that suggested genuine crisis management rather than bureaucratic persecution. Hawk sat at the head of the conference table, aerial reconnaissance photos spread before him like battle plans. We've located the source, he announced without preamble. Underground facility, roughly 12 kilometers northeast of the shopping district incident. The photos were remarkably detailed, satellite imagery, thermal scans, structural analysis from multiple angles. What they showed made Deku's stomach clench with recognition. It's massive, Dr. Yamamoto observed, her earlier hostility replaced by professional concern. The main chamber alone is larger than a football stadium, and the equipment signatures match theoretical profiles for large-scale psychological amplification, added a technician Deku didn't recognize. Whatever they're building down there, it could affect the entire city. Fascinating architecture, Aizen's voice murmured with what sounded like professional interest. The geometric patterns suggest a resonance amplification array scaled up by several orders of magnitude. Quite ambitious. The projection called himself the true heir, Deku said aloud. He seems to think he's carrying on Aizen's work but with better resources and modern technology. Hawks nodded grimly. Which brings us to why you're here. We need someone who understands the theoretical framework behind this kind of operation. Someone who can predict their tactics and counter their strategies. You want me to help plan the assault, Deku realized. More than that, Dr. Yamamoto slid a tablet across the table. We want you to lead the tactical coordination. Your performance during the shopping district incident demonstrated capabilities that no other hero possesses. The tablet displayed a live feed from news networks across the city. Headlines about the mind control hero had shifted dramatically. Now they read, Coordination Genius saves thousands, and new type of hero emerges. Public opinion has shifted in your favor, Hawks explained. But trust is fragile. One mistake, one hint that you're using your abilities unethically, and it all collapses. Which is why, Dr. Yamamoto continued, we're proposing something unprecedented. Complete operational transparency. She activated a holographic display showing what looked like a heads-up display interface. Real-time streaming of your visual and auditory input during the mission. Everything you see, every decision you make, every use of your quirk, broadcast live to oversight channels and public networks. Deku stared at the interface, understanding the implications immediately. You want me to let everyone watch while I coordinate a hero operation. We want you to prove that perception-based coordination can be ethical, Hawks said. That tactical manipulation can serve heroic purposes without violating personal autonomy. How deliciously ironic, Aizen's voice observed. They want you to demonstrate ethical manipulation by manipulating public perception of your own ethical standards. And if something goes wrong, Deku asked, if I make a mistake or have to use questionable tactics, then everyone will see it happen in real time, Dr. Yamamoto replied bluntly. Your career as a hero will be over before it really begins. The weight of the proposal settled on Deku's shoulders like a lead blanket. Every tactical decision, every use of his quirk, every moment when Aizen's influence might show through, all of it would be visible to millions of viewers. I'll do it, he said quietly. Hawks raised an eyebrow. You don't want time to think about it. No, Deku's voice grew stronger. If I'm going to be a hero with these abilities, people deserve to see exactly how I use them. Complete transparency is the only way to build real trust. Admirable sentiment, Aizen commented, though I suspect you'll find that complete honesty can be more manipulative than any lie. The UA tactical planning room had been transformed into something resembling a military command center. Multiple screens displayed facility layouts, hero deployment charts, and real-time intelligence updates. Class 1A sat around the main table, their usual casual atmosphere replaced by the focused intensity of people preparing for serious danger. Estimated enemy force is unknown, Aizawa reported, pointing to the facility schematics. But given the scale of their psychological manipulation capabilities, we should assume they have significant defensive measures in place. The primary objective is disruption of the amplification array, All Might added, his civilian form somehow more imposing in this context. Secondary objectives include rescue of any civilians who might be held inside, and capture or neutralization of the individual calling himself the true heir. Deku studied the facility layout with the cold analytical precision that had become second nature. The central chamber is the key, he said. Everything else is just support infrastructure. If we can reach the core and shut down the amplification system, the rest of their capabilities collapse. And how do we reach the core? Todoroki asked. Multiple coordinated approaches, Aizen's voice suggested. Draw their attention with obvious assault routes while the real strike team infiltrates through less defended vectors. We split into 3 teams, Deku said, translating the tactical assessment into his own words. Team 1 creates a distraction at the main entrance. Team 2 flanks through the service tunnels. Team 3 drops directly into the central chamber from above. That's a lot of moving parts, Ida observed. Coordinating that level of complexity in real time, that's where the streaming protocol comes in. Deku pulled up the HUD interface on the main display. Everyone will be able to see my tactical overview in real time. You'll know what I'm seeing, what I'm planning, and how I'm using my quirk to coordinate the operation. He activated the system for demonstration, and suddenly his visual perspective appeared on every screen in the room. The interface showed targeting reticles around each of his classmates, tactical information flowing past in constant streams, and subtle indicators showing where his perception-based coordination was taking effect. This is what command perspective looks like, he explained, feeling strangely vulnerable having his mental processes so completely exposed. Every decision, every tactical consideration, every use of mirror moon, all of it visible to anyone watching the feed. That's, Yaoyorozu paused, studying the complexity of the display. That's an incredible amount of information processing. How do you manage it all? Practice, Aizen's voice said dryly. And a certain natural aptitude for viewing people as strategic resources rather than individuals. It's not that different from analyzing hero fights, Deku said, pushing aside the darker implications. Just more information streams happening simultaneously. The question, Bakugo said bluntly, is whether you can maintain that level of coordination while the whole world is watching for any sign that you're crossing ethical lines. It was a fair point. The streaming protocol would make every moment of moral ambiguity visible to critics who were already looking for reasons to condemn him. Then I'll have to make sure I don't cross any lines, Deku replied. And if the situation requires tactics that look questionable to outside observers, Tsuyu asked with her characteristic directness. Deku was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. Then I trust you to hold me accountable, he said finally. The kill word protocols are still in effect. If any of you think I'm going too far, say King's Gambit and everything stops immediately. Fascinating, Aizen observed. You're essentially creating a democratic check on tactical decision-making. How uniquely naive. It's not naive, Deku said aloud, not caring that it looked like he was talking to himself. It's necessary. His classmates exchanged the now familiar look that meant Aizen was offering commentary. What's he saying now? Bakugo asked. That trusting others to limit my power is naive. Yeah, well, he's the one who ended up defeated and imprisoned, Bakugo replied with characteristic bluntness. Maybe his tactical genius wasn't as perfect as he thought. Touché, Aizen admitted with what sounded like amusement. The equipment check felt like preparation for war. Tactical radios, emergency medical supplies, quirk enhancement gear, and the specialized recording equipment that would broadcast Deku's perspective to the world. Final systems check, the HPSC technician announced, adjusting the camera array mounted on Deku's tactical vest. Visual feed is clean, audio is clear, biometric monitoring is active. You're live in 30 seconds. Deku took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to attempt. Not just the mission itself, but the complete transparency that would strip away any pretense or privacy. Remember, Hawk said quietly, once this feed goes live, every decision you make will be scrutinized by millions of viewers. Military analysts, political commentators, other heroes, civilians, everyone will have an opinion about your tactics. I know, Deku replied, surprised by how calm he felt. And you're still willing to do this. I have to. If I want people to trust heroes with perception-based quirks, they need to see exactly how those abilities can be used ethically. Or they need to see how effectively ethical constraints can be bypassed when properly motivated, Aizen suggested. This level of transparency could work in our favor, showing them that benevolent manipulation is still manipulation. 5 seconds, the technician announced. Deku activated his quirk fully, feeling the familiar expansion of spatial awareness and tactical analysis capabilities. The HUD interface lit up with information streams, target tracking, and coordination protocols. Live, the technician confirmed. Somewhere across the city, millions of viewers were now seeing through Deku's eyes as he prepared to lead the most complex hero operation in recent memory. The chat channels were probably exploding with commentary, analysis, and criticism. But all of that faded into background noise as his enhanced perception picked up the subtle wrongness emanating from the underground facility. Reality distortion effects, psychological pressure waves, and the unmistakable signature of large-scale mind manipulation in progress. Teams, report status, Deku said into his comm system, his voice carrying the calm authority that had become second nature during tactical operations. Team 1 ready for frontal assault, Endeavor's voice came back, professional and focused. Team 2 in position at service entrance, Best Genist reported. Team 3 prepared for vertical insertion, Hawks confirmed. Deku took one last look at the facility schematics, feeling Aizen's analytical intelligence overlay his own tactical instincts. Excellent positioning, the voice observed, though I suspect our opponent has prepared some surprises. This will be educational. All teams, Deku announced, Operation Mirror Break is go, execute on my mark. The final battle for the soul of heroic ethics was about to begin, and the entire world would be watching. In a secure bunker beneath the city, a figure in flowing robes watched multiple screens showing the hero deployment with calm satisfaction. So predictable, the true heir murmured, studying Deku's tactical positioning through intercepted surveillance feeds. Still thinking in terms of traditional assault patterns, still limiting himself with unnecessary moral constraints. He gestured to a technician operating complex psychological manipulation equipment. Activate the resonance field. Let's see how well young Aizen's ethics hold up when the entire operation depends on his willingness to do whatever it takes to win. The massive amplification array began to hum with power, and throughout the city, millions of people felt a subtle shift in their emotional state without understanding why. The true heir smiled as he watched Deku's biometric readings spike in response to the psychological pressure. Welcome to the real test, my predecessor, he whispered. Let's see what you're truly made of. The underground facility's main entrance looked deceptively mundane, just a maintenance door in the side of a concrete utility building. But Deku's enhanced perception could feel the wrongness radiating from beneath the ground like heat from a furnace. Team 1, begin frontal approach, he said into his comm, watching his HUD display the tactical overview that millions of viewers were now seeing. Chat messages scrolled past faster than he could read them, mostly supportive, but with enough criticism and concern to remind him that every decision was being judged in real time. Through the live feed, he watched Endeavor's flames create exactly the kind of obvious distraction they'd planned. bright, loud, and impossible to ignore, perfect for drawing attention away from the real infiltration routes. Team 2, you're clear for service entrance approach, Deku continued, feeling the strange duality of conducting tactical operations while simultaneously performing for an audience. Quite the balancing act, Aizen's voice observed. Maintaining operational effectiveness while ensuring your every move appears heroically appropriate to civilian observers. Contact, Best Jeanist's voice crackled through the comm. Multiple defensive systems activating. Some kind of automated security grid. On Deku's HUD, thermal imaging showed Team 2 encountering what looked like a maze of laser grids and pressure plates. Nothing lethal, whoever built this facility wasn't trying to kill intruders, just delay and channel them. They want us to come in through specific routes, Deku realized. Team 3, abort vertical insertion. It's a trap, confirmed, Hawk's voice came back. Reading massive energy signatures directly above the target zone, looks like they're expecting aerial approaches. Of course they are, Aizen commented with what sounded like professional appreciation. This true air person has studied our methods carefully. They know how we think, how we coordinate, how we prioritize tactical objectives. Deku studied the facility layout again, this time looking for what they weren't supposed to see. The patterns Aizen's memories whispered about, hidden passages, secondary objectives, the kind of misdirection that made opponents focus on the wrong targets. All teams' new plan, he announced, his voice carrying the calm authority that had become second nature. The facility isn't designed to keep us out. It's designed to funnel us toward the central chamber through a specific route. So we don't take that route, Endeavor asked, his flames continuing their distraction display. No, we take exactly the route they want us to take, Deku replied, feeling the tactical solution crystallize in his mind, but not the way they expect. The service tunnels beneath the facility were a maze of concrete corridors and mechanical systems. Team 2 moved through them with professional efficiency, their progress tracked by Deku's enhanced perception and broadcast to millions of viewers through the streaming interface. Motion sensors every 50 meters, Best Jeanist reported quietly. But they're calibrated for normal movement patterns, if we adjust our approach vectors. I can help with that, Deku said, activating Mirror Moon to create subtle perception adjustments that made the heroes appear to be moving in slightly different locations than they actually were. The sensors tracked phantom movements, while the real infiltration continued undetected. The live stream chat exploded with commentary about the ethical implications of fooling automated systems, but Deku pushed the distraction aside. This wasn't manipulation of people, it was tactical misdirection against machines. Central chamber reached, Team 2 announced, and this is not what we expected. The camera feeds from Best Jeanist's position showed a vast underground space dominated by a single massive structure. It looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a radio telescope. Geometric arrays of crystalline components arranged in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. But what caught Deku's attention were the people. Dozens of technicians in white coats worked at control stations around the device's perimeter. They moved with the same unsettling coordination he'd seen in the shopping district, but their eyes were alert and aware. Not mind-controlled, willingly cooperating. They're not being coerced, he realized with growing unease. These people chose to be here. Fascinating, Aizen's voice murmured. A cult of personality built around scientific advancement rather than personal power. How? Refreshingly honest. Team 1, what's your status? Deku asked, needing more information before committing to any specific approach. Meeting significant resistance, Endeavor replied, his voice strained with effort. These aren't defensive systems, they're psychological warfare platforms, some kind of fear amplification effect that makes you want to turn around and leave. Deku felt it too, even through the remote connection. A creeping sense of dread that whispered about terrible consequences if the mission continued. Not mind control, exactly, but emotional manipulation on a massive scale. Crude but effective, Aizen assessed. They're using fear to create natural psychological barriers. Most heroes would interpret this as a reason to withdraw and reassess. But not us, Deku muttered. Indeed. Because we understand that fear is just another form of information to be processed and overcome. The central chamber's entrance finally came into view, a massive door marked with warning symbols and protected by energy barriers that pulsed with unnatural light. Team 2 in position, Best Jeanist reported, but these barriers don't look like standard technology. Because they're not, Deku said, studying the patterns through his teammates' camera feeds. They're manifestations of collective desire. The facility isn't just amplifying psychological effects, it's turning them into physical reality. Now you're beginning to understand the true scope of their research, Aizen said approvingly. This is what I was working toward in my original experiments. The boundary between psychology and physics is far more permeable than most people realize. A new voice cut through the calm chatter, broadcast directly into their systems from inside the facility. "Welcome, young Aizen," the true heir's voice echoed through every radio frequency. "I'm impressed by your tactical adaptation, but now comes the real test." The barriers around the central chamber door flickered and vanished, revealing not an entrance but a massive screen displaying the true heir's calm, intelligent face. "Your streaming protocol is quite clever," he continued, his image somehow managing to project directly onto Deku's HUD display. "Complete transparency as a form of psychological manipulation. Very sophisticated." The live stream chat exploded with confusion and concern as viewers realized the enemy was addressing them directly through the hero's communication systems. "But transparency works both ways," the true heir said, his smile widening. "Let me show your audience what you're really dealing with." The screens throughout the facility activated simultaneously, displaying feeds from across the city. Streets, buildings, parks, schools, everywhere, people were beginning to move with the same eerie coordination they'd seen in the shopping district. But this time, it wasn't limited to one area. The effect was spreading across the entire metropolitan area like a slow-motion explosion. "Impossible," Team 1 breathed. "The range is theoretically unlimited once you have sufficient amplification," Deku finished, feeling sick as he watched the scope of the manipulation unfold. "He's using the entire city as a resonance array." "Brilliant," Aizen's voice said with what sounded like genuine admiration. "I never considered scaling the effect to this magnitude. The psychological energy of several million coordinated minds could reshape reality on a massive scale," Deku completed the thought aloud. "Exactly," the true heir's voice boomed through their comm systems. "You understand the implications better than your colleagues. Tell them, young Aizen, what happens when several million people all desire the same thing simultaneously." Deku's mouth went dry as the answer became clear. "It becomes real. Whether it was possible before or not. And what do you think several million people desire most desperately in this moment of crisis?" the true heir asked. The answer hit Deku like a physical blow. On every screen, in every camera feed, the coordinated crowds were all facing the same direction, all looking toward the hero teams attempting to stop the crisis, all wanting the heroes to save them. "He's not trying to control the population," Deku realized with growing horror. "He's weaponizing their faith in us." "Elegant," Aizen observed. "Turn the population's trust in heroes into a form of psychological pressure that makes failure literally impossible to conceive. The more desperately they want you to succeed, the more their collective will bend reality to ensure that success." "But that's," Deku struggled to articulate the wrongness of it. "That's not heroism, that's just manufactured victory." "Is it?" the true heir asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity. "When several million people believe absolutely in your ability to save them, are you not obligated to live up to that belief? When their collective faith makes you capable of feats that should be impossible, are you not morally required to use that power?" The philosophical implications made Deku's head spin. If the population's belief could literally alter reality to ensure heroic success, then failure became not just unlikely but psychologically inconceivable. "Team leaders report," he said, trying to focus on immediate tactical concerns. "The fear effects are intensifying," Endeavor replied. "But there's something else now, a sense of absolute confidence, like failure isn't even a possibility worth considering." "Same here," Best Genist confirmed. "It's like the universe itself is conspiring to make our mission succeed." "Because it is," Aizen explained. "Several million minds all focused on the same desired outcome create a localized reality field where that outcome becomes inevitable. You're not just fighting the true heir now, you're fighting the collective unconscious of an entire city." "And if we don't want to win on those terms?" Deku asked. "Then you'll have to find a way to succeed despite the universe itself trying to help you." The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. They were facing an enemy who had weaponized hope itself, turning the population's faith in heroes into a form of cosmic manipulation that made genuine heroism nearly impossible. "New plan," Deku announced, his voice cutting through the philosophical complexity with tactical clarity. "We're going to do something the true heir won't expect." "Which is?" Hawks asked from his Overwatch position. "We're going to fail," The comm channels went silent except for the hum of confusion. Not actually fail, Deku clarified quickly, seeing the live stream chat exploding with panic. But we're going to make it look like we're failing. Give the population something other than blind faith to focus on. Risky, Aizen observed. Psychological manipulation of this scale is notoriously difficult to control once it begins cascading. Team 2, I need you to stage a tactical retreat, Deku continued, his mind working through the implications faster than he could fully articulate them. Make it look like the defenses are too strong. Team 1, same thing, pull back and regroup. Are you insane? Endeavor's voice carried genuine alarm. The moment people start believing we might lose, they'll stop expecting reality to bend in our favor, Deku finished. And we can win this fight on our own terms instead of theirs. It was the most counterintuitive tactical decision he'd ever made. Instead of leveraging the population's faith, he was deliberately undermining it to preserve the authenticity of whatever victory they might achieve. Fascinating approach, Aizen said with what sounded like genuine respect. I never would have considered deliberately sabotaging such a significant tactical advantage. That's the difference between us, Deku replied quietly. And for the first time since the memories had started, Aizen's voice was completely silent. The screens displaying the true heir's face flickered with what might have been surprise or confusion. Interesting choice, young Aizen, he said finally. Let's see how long your principles hold up when people start dying. The real battle was about to begin. The tactical retreat should have felt like defeat, but instead it felt like shedding dead weight. As the hero teams pulled back from their initial positions, Deku could sense the shift in the city's psychological atmosphere. The desperate, reality-bending faith giving way to something more manageable. Fear, yes, but also the kind of uncertainty that left room for genuine heroism. Regrouping at Checkpoint Alpha, Best Jeanist reported, his voice carrying the professional calm of someone who'd been in enough real battles to know the difference between tactical repositioning and actual failure. Same here, Endeavor confirmed from Team 1's position. The fear amplification effects are diminishing now that we're not pushing directly against their defenses. Curious, Aizen's voice finally returned, though it sounded more thoughtful than usual. You may have stumbled upon something significant. By refusing to accept manufactured victory, you've created space for authentic tactical engagement. Is that approval I hear? Deku asked quietly. Perhaps your approach is unexpectedly sophisticated. The true heir's image appeared on every available screen again, but this time his expression carried less smug confidence. I confess, your tactical retreat puzzles me, he admitted. Most heroes would have pressed their advantage when reality itself was conspiring in their favor. Maybe that's why most heroes wouldn't be able to stop you, Deku replied, his voice carrying across all communication channels and into the live stream that millions were still watching. An interesting theory, shall we test it? What happened next made Deku understand why the true heir had been so confident in his facility's defenses. Every light in the underground complex went out simultaneously. Not just the artificial lighting, every screen, every indicator LED, every source of illumination vanished as if someone had thrown a switch on reality itself. The darkness was absolute. Not the dim visibility of a cloudy night, but the complete sensory deprivation of being sealed in a cave deep underground. Optical systems offline, Hawks reported, his voice tight with sudden tension. Thermal imaging, night vision, electromagnetic spectrum analysis, everything's dead. It's not just our equipment, Best Jeanist added with growing alarm. Something about this darkness is interfering with Quirk-based sensory abilities too. Deku felt it immediately. His enhanced spatial awareness, the subtle perception extensions that had become as natural as breathing, all of it was muffled, dampened, reduced to barely functioning whispers. Impressive, Aizen's voice said with genuine admiration. They've created a localized reality field that suppresses not just light, but all forms of enhanced perception. Fighting in this environment would be like trying to conduct an orchestra while wearing mittens. Team leaders, report status, Deku said, trying to project calm authority despite the disorientation of sensory deprivation. Team 1 holding position, Endeavor replied. But our coordination is compromised. Can't see teammates, can't gauge distances, can't identify targets. Team 2 experiencing similar difficulties, Best Jeanist confirmed. Standard tactical formations are impossible without visual reference points. The true heir's voice echoed through the darkness, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Welcome to true tactical complexity, young Aizen. No enhanced perception to guide you, no reality-bending faith to ensure success, no visual cues to coordinate your precious teamwork. Just you, your allies, and the darkness that reveals the futility of conventional heroism. Deku closed his eyes, not that it made any difference in the absolute blackness, and reached for something deeper than enhanced perception. "What are you doing?" Aizen's voice carried new interest. "Something you never learned," Deku replied quietly, "how to trust other people completely." He activated his comm system, but not for tactical coordination. Instead, he opened a channel to his classmates back at UA, who were monitoring the live stream and providing remote support. "Ida, I need precise timing coordination based on audio cues only." "Understood." Ida's voice came back immediately, engines already revving with anticipation. "Todoroki thermal mapping through indirect indicators, footsteps on cold surfaces, breath patterns in temperature variance." "Already working on it," Todoroki replied with calm efficiency. "Bakugo, I need you to coordinate pressure wave analysis. Sound bounces differently off different surfaces." "Got it, Deku, you sure about this?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything." "This is madness," Aizen protested. "You're attempting to coordinate a complex tactical operation through secondary sensory input processed by people who aren't even physically present." "Yeah," Deku said, feeling something settle into place in his chest. "Isn't it great?" What happened next would be studied in tactical academies for decades to come, though no one would ever be able to fully explain how it worked. Deku became the central processing node for a distributed sensory network that spanned both the underground facility and the UA monitoring center. His classmates, watching through multiple camera feeds and sensor arrays, provided real-time analysis that he synthesized into tactical awareness for the hero teams. "Endeavor, 3 steps forward, then hard left," he said, his voice carrying absolute certainty despite having no direct knowledge of the terrain. "There's a support pillar 18 inches from your current position." "How can you possibly?" Endeavor began, then stopped as his hand brushed the pillar exactly where predicted. "Team 2, you have a clear corridor extending 30 meters northeast from your current position," Deku continued, processing input from Todoroki's thermal analysis and Ida's acoustic mapping. "But there's a pressure plate at the 15-meter mark." "Confirmed," Best Jeanist replied after carefully testing the indicated location. "This is impossible. You can't have this level of spatial awareness without direct sensory input." "He's right," Aizen's voice said with something approaching awe. "What you're accomplishing shouldn't be possible with any known tactical framework." But Deku was barely listening to either the heroes or the voice in his head. He was focused on something else entirely, the growing sense of connection with his team that went beyond tactical coordination. Through Yaoyorozu's analysis of structural vibration patterns, he could feel the facility's layout like a living thing. Through Jiro's audio enhancement of the live stream feeds, he could hear heartbeats and breathing patterns that revealed emotional states and physical positions. Through Tsuyu's assessment of air current variations, he could track movement patterns throughout the complex. It wasn't his perception at all, it was theirs, shared and synthesized through bonds of trust that had nothing to do with quirk-based manipulation. "This is how it's supposed to work," he realized, speaking to himself as much as to anyone else. "What is?" Aizen asked. "Teamwork, real teamwork, not coordination through manipulation or control, but through genuine trust and shared purpose." The revelation was transformative. For months, he'd been thinking of his abilities as a burden to be managed, a dangerous inheritance that had to be carefully constrained. But maybe the real problem wasn't the abilities themselves, it was thinking of them as his abilities at all. "Team leader's new protocol," he announced, his voice carrying a new kind of authority. "I'm not coordinating this operation anymore. We're coordinating it together." He opened the tactical communication channels to full transparency, creating a shared mental space where every piece of information was available to everyone simultaneously. Not through quirk-based manipulation, but through communication technology and genuine collaboration. "Hawks, you're our Overwatch coordinator. Use your spatial awareness to provide navigation guidance. Endeavor, your point and psychological pressure management. Your flames can't provide light, but they can create sound and thermal references. Best Jeanist, your terrain mapping and structural analysis. Use your fibers to create tactile reference networks. Everyone else, you're my extended senses. Feed me information and I'll synthesize it into tactical awareness for the team." "This is completely insane," Aizen protested. "You're attempting to distribute command authority across multiple individuals with no central control mechanism." "Exactly," Deku replied. No central control, just mutual trust and shared responsibility. The true heir's voice cut through the growing coordination, carrying a note of genuine alarm for the first time. What are you doing? This level of tactical integration without psychological manipulation, it should be impossible. Maybe impossible for you, Deku called back into the darkness, but not for people who actually trust each other. The assault on the central chamber proceeded like clockwork, despite the complete absence of visual coordination cues. The hero teams moved through the facility with the fluid grace of dancers performing a piece they'd rehearsed for years, guided by shared sensory input and mutual trust rather than supernatural perception. Thermal bloom ahead, Todoroki's voice came through the comm system. Large heat signature, probably the main amplification array. Confirmed, Hawks added from his position above the facility. Structural analysis suggests we're approaching the primary chamber. Team 2, you should have direct access to the core systems, Deku said, synthesizing reports from multiple remote observers. But be advised, the energy signature suggests someone's waiting for you. Someone's always waiting for us, Best Jeanist replied with dry humor. Occupational hazard. The central chamber door opened with a sound like thunder, revealing not darkness but blinding light that rendered the hero's adapted vision completely useless. Welcome to my workshop, the true heir's voice said, now clearly coming from directly ahead of them. As their vision slowly adjusted, the scale of the operation became clear. The chamber was vast, easily the size of an aircraft hangar, and filled with equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Crystalline arrays, geometric frameworks, and at the center of it all, a single figure in flowing robes standing beside a device that hummed with barely contained power. But what caught Deku's attention wasn't the impressive technology. It was the man's face. He was young, maybe 30 at most, with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm confidence that came from genuine expertise rather than inherited knowledge. This wasn't some delusional fanatic worshipping a historical figure. This was a genuine scientist who had taken Aizen's research and improved on it. You're not trying to resurrect him, Deku realized with growing understanding. You're trying to surpass him. The true heir smiled, the expression carrying warmth that was somehow more unsettling than any cold villain's sneer. Finally, someone who understands. I'm not interested in becoming Sosuke Aizen, I'm interested in achieving what he could only dream of. True synthesis of psychological and physical reality. The ability to reshape the world through will and understanding rather than force and deception. Fascinating, Aizen's voice murmured in Deku's head. He's taken my theoretical framework and applied it with none of my personal limitations. Personal limitations. I was always held back by the need to maintain deception, to pretend I was something other than what I was. This individual has no such constraints. He's operating with complete honesty about his goals. The true heir gestured to the massive device dominating the chamber's center. Behold the consensus engine, a machine capable of converting collective human belief into localized reality alteration. No more need for individual psychological manipulation. Simply convince enough people that something should be true and it becomes true. That's not how reality works, Endeavor protested, his flames casting dancing shadows across the crystalline arrays. Isn't it? The true heir's smile widened. Your own society is built on collective agreements about what's possible and what isn't. Quirks themselves are reality alterations powered by biological belief systems. I've simply scaled the process up and made it conscious. He activated something on a control panel, and the device's humming intensified. Throughout the city above, millions of people felt a subtle shift in their awareness, not control, but suggestion. A gentle nudge toward believing that the world could be better, safer, more perfect than it had ever been before. The beautiful thing about consensus reality, the true heir continued, is that it doesn't require deception. People want to believe the world can be improved. They want to have faith in something larger than themselves. I'm simply focusing that natural impulse. He's not wrong, Aizen admitted reluctantly. This approach is more elegant than anything I attempted, more honest, more sustainable, more likely to produce lasting results. And completely terrifying, Deku added, understanding the implications with crystalline clarity. Because if the true heir succeeded, if he could really convert human hope and faith into literal reality alteration, then the distinction between what was real and what people wanted to be real would disappear entirely. The world would become whatever the majority believed it should be, guided by whoever had the wisdom and power to shape those beliefs. It would be paradise, as long as you trusted the person making the decisions. I can see you understand the implications, the true heir said, watching Deku's expression with satisfaction. The question is, will you help me create a better world, or will you insist on preserving an imperfect one simply because it's natural? The device's humming reached a crescendo, and throughout the chamber, reality began to shimmer with possibility. The final choice was about to be made, and in Deku's mind, Aizen's voice whispered, "Choose wisely. This may be our only chance to witness the birth of a truly perfected world." But for the first time since the memories had begun, Deku found himself completely uninterested in Aizen's opinion. He had his team, his principles, and his own understanding of what heroism really meant. It would have to be enough. "All teams," he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute certainty, "prepare for coordinated shutdown of the consensus engine. We're ending this now." The true heir's smile faltered for the first time, even if it means preserving a world full of suffering and injustice. "Especially then," Deku replied, "because a perfect world created by force isn't perfect at all. It's just another kind of prison." The battle for reality itself was about to begin. The consensus engine's hum filled the chamber like the heartbeat of some massive mechanical god, and with each pulse, reality grew more malleable around them. Deku could see it in the way shadows bent at impossible angles, how the crystalline arrays seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, how the very air shimmered with potential. "Final warning," the true heir called out, his voice carrying genuine regret. "Once I activate the global synchronization protocol, there won't be any going back. Humanity will finally have the tools to reshape reality according to its highest aspirations." "Whose aspirations?" Deku asked, moving carefully through the maze of equipment with his team. "Yours, the majority's. What happens to people who don't want your perfect world? They'll adapt," the true heir replied with calm certainty. "Or they'll discover that their objections were based on limited understanding of what's truly possible." "He's not entirely wrong," Aizen's voice observed with what sounded like admiration. "This approach is far more sophisticated than my crude manipulations. He's offering genuine improvement rather than mere control." "But still without consent," Deku replied quietly. "Still forcing change on people who haven't chosen it. Sometimes the greatest kindness is not giving people a choice in their own salvation." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that made you a villain." The words hung in the air between them, not just in Deku's mind, but somehow audible to everyone in the chamber. The true heir paused in his preparations, and several of the hero team members exchanged glances. "You're speaking to him directly now," Todoroki observed with clinical interest. "He's been part of this from the beginning," Deku said, his voice carrying across the chamber and into the live stream that millions were still watching. "The memories, the tactical knowledge, the understanding of these techniques, it all came from Sosuke Aizen." "How dramatically honest of you," Aizen commented. "Though I suppose complete transparency was always your preferred approach. Because it's the only approach that actually works long-term," Deku replied. "Lies and manipulation might be more efficient, but they're not sustainable." The true heir had stopped his preparations entirely, watching the conversation with fascination. "Remarkable," he said. "You're having a philosophical debate with a dead man's memories while coordinating a tactical operation against impossible odds. How very human of you." "That's the point," Deku said, feeling something click into place in his understanding. "Being human means making choices, especially when those choices are difficult or inefficient." He opened his comm channels to full transparency, not just with his immediate team, but with his classmates back at UA who were providing remote support through the live stream. "Everyone ready?" he asked. "Coordination protocols established," Ida reported with characteristic precision. "Thermal mapping complete," Todoroki added. "Structural analysis finished," Yaoyorozu confirmed. "Audio coordination active," Jiro said. "Backup tactical systems online," Bakugo announced with his usual aggressive confidence. The true heir activated something on his control panel, and the consensus engine's hum rose to a crescendo that made the air itself vibrate with possibility. "Global synchronization initiating," he announced. "In 30 seconds, every human consciousness on Earth will be connected through a shared reality framework. No more war, no more suffering, no more preventable tragedy. Just collective progress toward a genuinely perfect world. This is your last chance," Aizen's voice said urgently. "Join him, use the power properly, help create something truly magnificent." "No," Deku said simply. "No, I've learned something you never did," Deku said, advancing toward the consensus engine with his team moving in perfect coordination around him. "Power isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about enabling choices." What happened next would be replayed and analyzed countless times, but no tactical expert would ever fully explain how it worked. The shutdown of the consensus engine required simultaneous actions at 17 different control points, coordinated to within milliseconds, while operating in an environment where reality itself was becoming unstable. It should have been impossible for anyone except a superhuman tactical genius with overwhelming force at their disposal. Instead, it was accomplished by a group of teenagers and professional heroes working together through nothing more sophisticated than trust and communication technology. "Hawks, disable the Eastern Array," Deku called out, his voice carrying absolute certainty despite having no direct visual on the target. "Endeavor, thermal shock to the central coupling. Todoroki's analysis indicates a critical weakness at the third resonance point. Best genist, fiber control to isolate the power conduits. Yaoyorozu's structural assessment shows you have a 12-second window." Each instruction was delivered with perfect timing and absolute confidence, based not on superhuman perception, but on information shared freely between teammates who trusted each other completely. "Impossible," Aizen breathed. "This level of coordination without any form of mental control, it shouldn't work." "That's because you never understood what real teamwork looks like," Deku replied, feeling the final pieces of the tactical puzzle fall into place. The true heir scrambled to maintain control of his device, but he was fighting a distributed network of cooperation that had no single point of failure. Every time he countered one approach, another team member adapted and found a new vector of attack. "You're destroying humanity's best chance for transcendence," he shouted over the growing chaos of failing systems. "We're preserving humanity's right to choose its own path," Deku called back. The consensus engine's harmonics reached critical instability, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a sound like reality tearing. The crystalline arrays began to resonate at frequencies that hurt to hear, and the air itself started to fracture into prismatic fragments. "All teams, emergency extraction," Deku commanded, but even as he said it, he knew they wouldn't make it to the exits in time. The device's overload was accelerating beyond anyone's ability to escape its effects. "Use the power," Aizen's voice said urgently. "Create an illusion that gets everyone to safety. Make them see exits where none exist, paths through impossible geometry. Save them the only way you can." For a moment, Deku wavered. The temptation was enormous. Use his abilities fully, without restraint, to save his teammates through mass perception manipulation. It would work. It would be heroic. It would prove that sometimes the ends justified the means. Instead, he made a different choice. "Everyone link hands," he called out over the chaos. "Physical contact right now. What are you doing?" Hawks shouted, but he was already reaching for Best Genist's outstretched hand. "Something Aizen never learned how to do," Deku replied, activating his quirk not to manipulate or control, but to share. Instead of creating illusions, he opened his enhanced perception to everyone touching him. The spatial awareness, the tactical analysis capabilities, the ability to sense movement and intention, all of it flowed through the human chain his teammates had formed. For the first time in his life, Deku used his abilities to empower others rather than guide them. "Now," he shouted, and suddenly everyone could see the path to safety with perfect clarity, not because he was showing them an illusion, but because he was sharing his genuine perception of the real world. They moved as one, flowing through the collapsing chamber like water finding its natural course, each person's enhanced awareness feeding back into the group consciousness until they weren't just a team anymore. They were a single organism with a shared purpose. The true heir watched them go with something like wonder in his eyes. "Incredible," he whispered as his life's work collapsed around him. "You found a way to achieve collective consciousness without sacrificing individual will. How? How did you know that was possible?" "Because someone very smart once told me that the best way to control people is to give them exactly what they want," Deku called back as they reached the emergency exits. "And what people want most is to matter, to be trusted, to be part of something larger than themselves without losing who they are." "I never said that," Aizen protested. "No," Deku agreed as they emerged into the morning sunlight. "But you should have." The collapse of the underground facility made international news, but what dominated the headlines was the footage from Deku's streaming feed. Hours of completely transparent tactical coordination, showing exactly how perception-based abilities could be used ethically and effectively in service of genuinely heroic goals. "Revolutionary approach to quirk-based teamwork," read one analysis from a military strategy journal. "New paradigm for perception-based hero work," announced a government policy report. Trust-based coordination networks may represent the future of emergency response, suggested an academic paper on crisis management. But Deku barely noticed the media coverage. He was more interested in the conversation happening in his own head. "Well played," Aizen's voice said with what sounded like genuine respect. "I confess, your approach achieved results I would not have thought possible." "Thank you," Deku replied, sitting alone in his dorm room after the longest day of his life. "Though I still maintain that more direct methods would have been more efficient." "Probably, but efficiency isn't the only thing that matters. Indeed, you have taught me something I thought impossible to learn." "What's that?" "That perhaps I was wrong about the fundamental nature of power. Perhaps true strength does come from enabling others rather than controlling them." Deku was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of that admission. "Does this mean you're going to stop offering tactical advice?" "Oh, I suspect I'll continue to comment on situations as they arise. Old habits, you understand, but I think I'll try to learn from your example rather than attempting to shape you according to mine." "I'd like that. There is one final thing I should tell you, though." "What?" "The true heir was not entirely wrong about the nature of these memories. I am not simply residual neural patterns from a previous existence. The mechanism behind your abilities is more complex than that." Deku felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that under the right circumstances, with sufficient understanding of the principles involved, it might be possible for consciousness to persist beyond physical death, and that the research into desire amplification and reality alteration has applications far beyond what we witness today." "Are you telling me you're actually alive somehow?" "I am telling you that the distinction between alive and dead may be less absolute than most people assume. But more importantly, I am telling you that there may be others out there with access to similar knowledge. The true heir was brilliant, but he was not unique." The implications of that statement made Deku's head spin. If Aizen was right, then today's victory might have been just the beginning of a much larger conflict. "Will you help me face whatever comes next?" Deku asked. "Of course. Though I suspect you'll find that you need my assistance less and less as time passes. You're becoming quite formidable in your own right." A knock at his door interrupted the conversation. Deku opened it to find most of Class 1A crowded in the hallway, carrying what looked like party supplies and way too much food. "Celebration time," Uraraka announced cheerfully. "Our friend just saved the world and proved that perception-based heroes can be trusted. That deserves cake." "And a really long discussion of tactical coordination theory," Ida added with characteristic intensity. "And an explanation of how the hell you pulled off that shared consciousness thing," Bakugo said bluntly. "Because that was either brilliant or insane, and I need to know which." Deku looked at his classmates, his teammates, his friends, the people who had trusted him completely when the entire world was watching for any sign of betrayal, and felt something settle permanently into place in his chest. "They're good people," Aizen observed quietly. "Yeah," Deku said, opening his door wide to let everyone in. "They are. You chose well, Izuku Midoriya." And for the first time since the memories had begun, Aizen's voice carried no hint of manipulation or hidden agenda. Just genuine respect for a path he'd never been able to walk himself. As his friends filled his room with laughter and celebration, Deku found himself thinking about the future. There would be other challenges, other villains, other impossible choices between efficiency and ethics. But whatever came next, he would face it as himself, not as Aizen's successor or his opposite, but as someone who had learned from the past while choosing his own future. The mirror moon rose over UA that night, reflecting light that was borrowed but somehow transformed in the process. Beautiful, unattainable, and entirely authentic in its borrowed radiance. It seemed like the perfect metaphor for a hero who had inherited a villain's memories and chosen to become something entirely new. In his final report to the Hero Public Safety Commission, Deku wrote, "Perception-based quirks can be integrated safely into heroic operations through protocols emphasizing transparency, consent, and distributed authority. The key is not to eliminate the potential for manipulation, but to create frameworks that make ethical use more attractive than unethical alternatives." The report became the foundation for new regulations governing mind-adjacent abilities, establishing UA's approach as the international standard for training heroes with psychologically complex quirks. But more importantly, it represented the final synthesis of Izuku Midoriya and Sosuke Aizen into something that was greater than either could have been alone. A hero who understood the nature of power well enough to choose restraint. A tactician who valued trust more than control. A young man who had looked into the abyss of his own potential for corruption and chosen to be better. The Mirror Moon hero was ready for whatever challenges awaited in the darkness ahead. Plus ultra, Aizen's voice said quietly, using All Might's favorite phrase with something that might have been pride. Plus ultra, Deku agreed and stepped forward into his future. 6 months later, the Mirror Moon Protocol had been adopted by hero agencies across 3 continents. Perception-based heroes worked in teams with built-in ethical oversight, streaming their decision-making processes to ensure public trust while maintaining operational effectiveness. Deku had received offers from dozens of professional agencies, but he'd chosen to stay at UA for his remaining years of training. There was still more to learn, more ways to grow, more techniques to develop that balanced power with responsibility. And sometimes, late at night when he was studying in the library, he would catch glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision. Figures that looked almost familiar, faces that suggested other memories waiting to surface, other lives that had left traces in the quantum foam of consciousness. The true heir had been right about one thing: death might not be as final as everyone assumed, but that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Deku was content to be exactly who he had chosen to become. A hero who carried the shadows of the past while walking steadily toward the light. Well done, Aizen's voice whispered one final time, growing fainter as genuine integration replaced the need for internal dialogue. I believe I can finally rest. And in the depths of Deku's mind, where memory met possibility and choice transformed inheritance into identity, the voice of Sosuke Aizen faded into peaceful silence. The Mirror Moon hero was ready to shine with his own light. What a journey, right? From quirkless underdog to master tactician who chose trust over control every single time. Deku really showed us that it's not about the power you inherit, it's about who you choose to be with it. Drop a comment with your favorite scene. Mine's gotta be that final battle where he literally shared his perception with the whole team. That was clean. Hit subscribe for more crossover chaos, and let me know what insane combination you want next.
Peace.